Chapter 2582, The Inspector. Although the interspatial ring left by San Shouwang did not contain many primordial stones, the divine destructive beast secret technique alone was very valuable. In addition, the interspatial ring also contained a large number of training resources, which includes various elixirs, divine weapons, treasures, and secret techniques. Those were exceptionally valuable things. San Shouwang also possessed a heavenly treasure divine weapon. That divine weapon was a pair of gloves that San Shouwang had been using. Heavenly treasures were extremely useful even for an Earth ultimate god. Although San Shouwang's pair of gloves was just an ordinary offensive divine weapon, its value nonetheless was estimated to be about 1 million primordial stones. Overall, San Shouwang's interspatial ring did not disappoint him too much. After that, Jianghu settled down in the territorial lord mansion. The official army had already informed the Crimson Stone Fort of Jianghu beheading San Shouwang, and Crimson Stone Fort would soon send an inspector. On the other side, news of San Shouwang's beheading and the new territorial lord who was about to take office had instantly spread across the entire northern Darkstar territory. The many wildernesses under the northern Darkstar territory's command had many sects, and all of them were shocked for a brief moment after hearing the news and soon began preparing congratulatory gifts. It had been more than 10,000 years since a new territorial lord took office. Those forces and sects, big or small, dared not take the new territorial lord lightly. 3 months passed by in a flash. 3 figures were standing in the void in front of the territorial lord mansion. The person leading was a man dressed in a long and luxurious purple robe. The purple-robed man had a menacing look with a hint of pride between his eyebrows as he looked down at the territorial lord mansion below. Master Jianghu is in the territorial lord mansion. Let's go down and see him, said a black-armored old man next to him. No need. The purple-robed man waved his hand and merely stood there as a huge gush of divine aura suddenly erupted from his body. He directly sent it downward onto the mansion below. In the territorial lord mansion, Jianghu, who was quietly meditating, frowned and opened his eyes. Is this a peak Earth ultimate god's divine aura? It must be from the inspector sent by Crimson Stone Fort. He uses his divine aura to oppress this area as soon as he arrives. Is he trying to flex his powers? Jianghu muttered before moving his body and soon appeared in the void above. As soon as he arrived in the void, he saw the purple-robed man who was exuding the divine aura. Are you the inspector? Jianghu acted humbly. Jianghu had to give a face to the inspector sent by Crimson Stone Fort after all. Yes, I am. Are you Jianghu? The purple-robed man wore a cold face as his eyes locked on Jianghu. I heard you're just a peak ultimate god? Yes. Jianghu nodded slightly. What's the name of the previous territorial lord again? San Shouwang? He's really a useless bum. How could he possibly die in the hands of a peak ultimate god? How embarrassing. The purple-robed man gave a contemptuous look. Jianghu smiled faintly. He was not annoyed and humbly replied, Inspector, let's enter the mansion and talk. The purple-robed man nodded slightly and immediately headed toward the territorial lord mansion. In the magnificent-looking palace, Jianghu did not take his usual elevated seat. Instead, he sat face-to-face with the purple-robed man. The 2 people who came with the purple-robed man were also seated nearby as maids in territorial lord mansion brought tea, with Xiao Tiexing standing obediently next to Jianghu. Jianghu, I won't beat around the bush. I came here under the order of Crimson Stone Fort to choose the right person and take over as the new territorial lord. The official army recommended you, but you're just a peak ultimate god. The purple-robed man looked cold. There are a total of 381 stellar regions under the Danyang Holy Realm's command, and there are of course 381 territorial lords. All of these territorial lords were experts from the Earth ultimate god realm and above, be it those who are in the office or the ones who have. Only with an Earth ultimate god in place managing the stellar region can the stellar region be peaceful. There has never been a precedent for a peak ultimate god to become a territorial lord in the Danyang Holy Realm. It'll be difficult to convince the public if you become the new territorial lord. I believe the northern Darkstar territory will be completely in a mess not long after this. Jianghu frowned slightly. He knew that Crimson Stone Fort sent an inspector to verify whether he had the strength to become a territorial lord. However, the inspector in front of him did not say anything to verify his strength after talking so much. The inspector merely insisted that Jianghu realm was not qualified to become a territorial lord, which was a deliberate act to embarrass him. Master Inspector, one's cultivation realm doesn't mean everything. Am I right? Jianghu asked. One's cultivation realm of course cannot represent everything, as you must have the power of an Earth Ultimate God since you can kill San Shouwang. However, a peak Ultimate God is still inferior to a real Earth Ultimate God when standing side by side in terms of aura, though both might have similar combat strength, and that intimidating aura is exactly what a territorial lord needs. It's quite difficult for you to be the territorial lord with your current cultivation realm, with that being said. However, it's not impossible, as you may have to pay a little price for it, said the purple-robed man slowly with his eyes squinted. Jian Wushuang raised his brows. He understood the message's meaning. The purple-robed man was trying to make things difficult for him so he could reap some benefits from Jian Wushuang. How much is the price to pay? Jian Wushuang asked calmly. Not much. 3 million primordial stones, and he'll take care of everything after I go back. As long as there are no major riots or revolts within the northern Darkstar territory, I can guarantee you will be the despot here without any worries. The purple-robed man cracked an evil smile. 3 million primordial stones? Jian Wushuang kept a straight face but was sneering in his heart. 3 million primordial stones was a high price to pay. The inspector was not only greedy but also asking way too much. Perhaps the inspector knew Jian Wushuang had just killed San Shouwang, thought that Jian Wushuang might have gotten a great deal of wealth from San Shouwang, and was trying to make some easy money. Any other person might have given away under the inspector's pressure were it someone else. One might have just given 3 million primordial stones away when comparing the benefit one could gain after becoming the territorial lord. However, Jian Wushuang was not a pushover. Master Inspector, is it really that hard for me to become a territorial lord? Do I really have to pay 3 million primordial stones? Jian Wushuang smiled and looked at the purple-robed man. Chapter 2583, Lesson Learned? Well, there are other methods. The purple-robed man in a low voice said, We live in a natural selection world where only the fittest survives, hence I've personally come here to verify your capabilities and qualification to be the territorial lord. Although you are only a peak ultimate god, you can choose to fight me and maybe become the new Northern Darkstar territorial lord so long you can convince me of your qualifications during the battle. I have to remind you that I've always been harsh on people and it's not easy to receive my approval. The purple-robed man moved his body after he finished speaking. He started emanating a gush of tyrannical power only high-level Earth Ultimate God could, displaying a much stronger divine power breath than when he cast over the territorial lord mansion earlier. The effect was much worse since he focused all his powers on Jian Wushuang alone. The two primary-level Earth Ultimate God behind the purple-robed man frowned upon seeing what had happened. According to usual practice, Jian Wushuang was only required to fight with either of them, and so long Jian Wushuang could prove himself to be of similar strength level, he would have passed the test. However, the inspector wanted Jian Wushuang to battle against himself instead. It was clear the inspector used his authority to do injustice to Jian Wushuang so that Jian Wushuang would have to give up in the face of defeat and obediently handed over 3 million primordial stones. However, the inspector and those two primary-level Earth Ultimate Gods who came along merely got the message that Jian Wushuang killed San Shouwang with no idea that San Shouwang was a high-level Earth Ultimate God. It was because San Shouwang had previously been hiding his strength too well. The Crimson Stone Fort always believed that San Shouwang was only a primary-level Earth Ultimate God. Although his strength was exposed during the battle against Jian Wushuang, the official army did not report that to the Crimson Stone Fort. The inspector would definitely not be belittled Jian Wushuang and behaved so condescendingly had he known that San Shouwang was a high-level Earth Ultimate God. Jian Wushuang ignored the divine power breath and stood up as expected. He smiled indifferently and said, In that case, please show me a thing or two, Master Inspector. Are you sure you want me to do it? The purple-robed man narrowed his eyes with a slight hint of disdainfulness. He believed Jian Yi understood his message and was being imprudent by insisting on fighting him. Please show me a thing or two, said Jian Wushuang again. Let's fight in this mansion then if that's the case. I'm interested in seeing how capable a peak ultimate god like you are. The purple-robed man did not hide his anger. He gave Jian Wushuang a cold glance, flapped his sleeves and immediately walked out of the hall. Jian Wushuang's mouth curled slightly and went after him. Not long after, Jian Wushuang and the purple-robed man arrived at the combat field outside the territorial lord mansion and gazed at each other from a distance. The two primary-level Earth Ultimate Gods who came with the purple-robed man, Xiao Tiexin, and Commander Tsang Heng who arrived after hearing about what was happening stood on the combat field's edge. I don't have much time to waste on you. Show me what you've got. The purple-robed man stared at Jian Wushuang with his hands behind his back. There was a hint of pride between his eyebrows. His high-level Earth Ultimate God realm allowed him to act arrogantly when facing a peak Ultimate God. He was never worried about Jian Wushuang's strength and capabilities at all. So what if Jian Wushuang killed San Shouwang? He was merely a peak Ultimate God which did not deserve the inspector's slightest attention after all. The purple-robed man had made up his mind. He wanted to teach Jian Wushuang a lesson, ravage Jian Wushuang and force Jian Wushuang to hand over 3 million primordial stones. Even if Jian Wushuang could not afford to pay 3 million primordial stones, he would try his best to extort as much as possible out of Jian Wushuang. There was no way he would leave northern Darkstar territory with empty hands. Master Inspector, I will do my best as you wish. You have to be careful though. Jian Wushuang gave a weird smile. Hurry up and don't dilly-dally. The purple-robed man still had his hands behind his back and did not even withdraw his divine weapon. Jian Wushuang did not hesitate. He held the Blood Mountain sword as the stellar strength in his body surged. The peak Ultimate God's divine power breath in his body instantly rose at an astonishing speed. His power breath had skyrocketed to the rank of a primary-level Earth Ultimate God within a short period. At the same time, the majestic golden divine power began to build up behind him and a golden god shadow which rose to the height of 1,800 feet soon appeared on his body. The golden god shadow was exuding a terrifying power that seemed to look down on everything. 7-Star's secret technique and divine god of punishment were both displayed. Jian Wushuang had completely displayed his full strength. The purple-robed man narrowed his eyes upon perceiving the soaring divine power breath within Jian Wushuang and the huge golden god shadow behind him. A peak Ultimate God who's capable of killing a primary-level Earth Ultimate God is truly capable after all. The purple-robed man was starting to take Jian Wushuang a little more seriously. Just a little. Jian Wushuang chuckled and immediately took action. About 100 apparitions instantly formed. Even the purple-robed man was a little surprised from the appearance of so many apparitions at the same time and moved frantically at an alarming speed. Jian Wushuang had already appeared in front of him with the Blood Mountain sword in his hand thrusting forward before the purple-robed man could even react. The thrusting motion seems casual but took space-time along with it. The purple-robed man noticed his extraordinary move and stopped acting all full of himself before taking out a soft sword in an attempt to resist the attack. However, his action was fruitless. Boom. An infinite sword intent struck the heavens. A perfect 100,000-mile sword world was displayed. The sword world was like a huge stone mill that could crush anything easily with its power that was only focused on the purple-robed man. What? The purple-robed man was deeply startled. Under such a strong sword world's oppression, the purple-robed man trembled to the point that his sword world had crumbled and was no longer able to be displayed anymore. His sword skills and overall strength were instantly reduced to an extremely low level. Even his sword-wielding speed was greatly reduced. Clang. Clang. Their swords had merely collided twice but the purple-robed man was already retreating miserably. Jian Wushuang's eyes flashed, so did the Blood Mountain sword in his hand. The world seemed to have fallen into a deep silence as though he was all alone. The sword in his hand thrust forward. That move dragged the surrounding space and time along. The entire world seemed to have been dragged along with his sword. An icy sword light loomed between heaven and earth with its casual movements which soon became the focus point between heaven and earth. It was the space-time sword technique, fourth form, break your heart. Chapter 2584. Levy Hum. It was just a simple movement where both figures crossed before Jian Wushuang returned to his original spot. His aura soon subsided along with the surrounding world which quieted down. Master Inspector, thanks for taking it easy on me. Jian Wushuang smiled. However, the purple-robed man was evidently in a paranoid. He had lost. He was a high-level Earth Ultimate God who wanted to teach Jian Wushuang a lesson but was almost instantly defeated. It happened too fast and too miserably. The tyrannical sword thrust which pierced through the world would have attacked him had Jian Wushuang not been lenient earlier. The matter of being able to resist and being able to survive the sword attack were two different concepts after all. This kid. The purple-robed man stared at Jian Wushuang with an extremely gloomy look. Behind him, the two primary-level Earth Ultimate Gods who came with him were exchanging looks of shock. They were dumbfounded when they received news that a mere peak Ultimate God Jian Wushuang had killed San Shouwang. There was a massive gap between peak Ultimate Gods and Earth Ultimate Gods and such occurrences were just too uncommon. A genius of that level would not be interested in the territorial lord position, hence they were doubtful of the news when they first received it. However, the truth lay before their eyes. Jian Wushuang was not only capable of defeating a primary-level Ultimate God but also a genuine high-level Earth Ultimate God. Master Inspector, I don't know if you'd approve of my strength? Otherwise we can continue fighting. Jian Wushuang smiled. The purple-robed man twitched his face. Continue fighting? He had belittled Jian Wushuang's strength in the battle earlier and was careless. However, Jian Wushuang's instant power boost frightened him and proved he was indeed the stronger one. Jian Wushuang was so much stronger than himself. He would simply be looking for trouble if he chose to continue fighting. As for the approval, although the purple-robed man was extremely unwilling, he had no choice but to produce an interspatial ring. This is your appointment letter and Territorial Lord token. You'll be the new Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord from today onward. The purple-robed man threw the token at Jian Wushuang before glancing at the two people behind him and said, "Let's go. Master Inspector, farewell." Jian Wushuang smiled and watched the purple-robed man and his entourage leave. The smile on Jian Wushuang's face disappeared upon the departure of the three before he peeked into the interspatial ring in his hand. Using his soul power to scan the ring, he found an appointment letter and a token within. Neither the appointment letter nor token was named, so Jian Wushuang had to do it himself. Master. Xiao Tiexin and Song Heng, who were at the edge of the field, stepped forward. Congratulations, Master, for becoming the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord. Xiao Tiexin exclaimed with joy. Territorial Lord. Song Heng saluted with a bow. I've managed to get the Territorial Lord position but offended the inspector just now, sneered Jian Wushuang. He deserves it. How could he use his inspector position and high-level Earth ultimate god powers to reap benefits from you? How crazy was he? Xiao Tiexin said. Jian Wushuang had beheaded San Shouwang, who was also a high-level Earth ultimate god. San Shouwang was powerful and in fact at least much more powerful than the inspector. Of course, the inspector would not be spared when even San Shouwang was annihilated by Jian Wushuang. I'm to be blamed for this. The inspector may not have acted so rashly to persecute you had I told Crimson Stone Fort that San Shouwang whom you killed was a high-level Earth ultimate god, Master, said Song Heng. No, you did the right thing. I'm indeed only a peak ultimate god, and if the news that I've beheaded a high-level Earth ultimate god spread, it'll inevitably cause a commotion. I think it's good for matters to develop as such since I still became the Territorial Lord. Jian Wushuang smiled. Master. Although the inspector approves of you as the Territorial Lord out of no choice today, I'm afraid he'll find ways to make things difficult for you after he returns, said Song Heng. What more can he do after I've been instituted the Territorial Lord position? Jian Wushuang asked. Inspectors are a very special position in Crimson Stone Fort. This position has easy access to a lot of benefits, with each inspection will usually bring him a great deal of wealth. It's a position to get fast money. It's hard to obtain such a position in Crimson Stone Fort without strong backers. The inspector had blatantly asked for 2 million primordial stones just now. He must have strong backers to do so. Furthermore, he could easily use his backer to make things difficult for you after returning to Crimson Stone Fort. For instance, a slight increase of 10 to 20% on levy every 1,000 years to Northern Darkstar territory is enough to cause you a massive headache, explained Song Heng solemnly. Levy? Jian Wushuang was surprised. He had heard about the levy. Every sect, force and clans within the many wildernesses of a stellar region, no matter large or small, would have to pay a certain amount of primordial stones to the Territorial Lord every 1,000 years. Thereafter, the stellar region Territorial Lords would have to pay those he collected to the person in the power within the said domain. Considering Northern Darkstar territory as an example, various sects, forces and clans would have to hand over money to the Territorial Lord every 1,000 years, but the Territorial Lord could only keep a small amount of the collection, as most had to be given to Crimson Stone Fort. What percentage was the levy paid to Crimson Stone Fort in every 1,000 years when San Shouwang was the Territorial Lord? Jian Wushuang asked. According to Crimson Stone Fort's rules, each Territorial Lord has to pay 70% of the levy collected every 1,000 years. However, if the inspector earlier deliberately wants to put you in trouble, he could always increase the levy to 80 or even 90%. Song Heng replied. 80 or 90%? Jian Wushuang's face turned ashen and solemnly said, if it's a rule set by Crimson Stone Fort, even an inspector with strong backing can't violate the rule as he wishes, right? No, it's not as simple as you think. Song Heng shook his head. The rules were hard and fast when Crimson Stone Fort was at its peak. No one in Danyang Holy Domain will dare to violate any of their rules, such that even Crimson Stone Fort higher-ups had to follow the rules. No one dares to violate it. But things are different now. Chapter 2585, New Territorial Lord Crimson Stone Fort is currently extremely chaotic with quite a few factions that aren't on good terms with no apparent authority at all. They are also losing their control over Danyang Holy Domain. Due to this, Crimson Stone Fort has set many rules that don't make sense. These inspectors won't dare to act so unscrupulously when collecting benefits in the past, but now they have no qualms at all. If that inspector just now has a good backer, he could really use his authority to increase the Northern Darkstar Territory's levy, said Song Heng. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. He also knew the Crimson Stone Fort was being torn apart since the falling of Crimson Stone Saint. Although Crimson Stone Saint's daughter, Yin Suer, controlled the Crimson Stone Fort, she did not have much power and was in a very bad situation. Nonetheless, Jian Wushuang had not expected that Yin Suer was in such hot soup. There were so many factions within Crimson Stone Fort competing with one another. No wonder it was in a mess. Northern Darkstar Territory is a huge stellar region after all. The amount of money paid by those sects and clans every 1,000 years will be an astronomical figure, and under normal circumstances, even obtaining the remaining 30% was quite a lot for an ordinary Earth Ultimate God after handing 70% over to Crimson Stone Fort. However, if the levy is increased by another 20% and becomes 90% instead, you will only obtain the piteous amount of 10%. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and then looked at Song Heng. I only need to pay the levy every 1,000 years to Crimson Stone Fort, while the wealth I gained by other means such as gifts from the clans after becoming the territorial lord is not included to be levied, right? Of course. Song Heng nodded. Except for the every 1,000-year levy, the wealth you have accumulated on your own regardless of the reason had nothing to do with Crimson Stone Fort. As long as there's no chaos in Northern Darkstar Territory, you can accumulate wealth as you like. This is why many experts are very keen to be a territorial lord. That's good. Jian Wushuang smiled. He did not care much about the every 1,000-year levy. 1,000 years was too long after all, and he would probably choose to leave the Northern Darkstar Territory before that time to explore bigger places. His strength would have also increased by multiple folds at that time and would not care for such meager money by that time. He could care less whether the inspector used despicable means to make things difficult for him. He had chosen to be a territorial lord because it would help him to collect a large number of primordial stones in a short period, which could be used to improve his strength. Commander Song Heng, go and spread the news that I will host a banquet in this mansion half a month later. Every sect and clan in Northern Darkstar Territory is invited, said Jian Wushuang. Yes. Song Heng immediately went to work. The various clans, sects, and powers in Northern Darkstar Territory's wilderness have long been informed that Jian Wushuang was about to become the new territorial lord. They had also prepared gifts, with some even sending their people on standby at Northern Darkstar Territory for the news to be announced. Therefore, those families and the sects in the wilderness began to act the very moment Song Heng started spreading the news. Half a month later, the territorial lord mansion was filled with visitors. All those sects from various wildernesses sent their gifts in advance. Half a month later, Jian Wushuang held a large-scale banquet in the territorial lord mansion. All the clans within Northern Darkstar Territory were showing Jian Wushuang great courtesy by having either their clan leaders or very powerful people from their clans in attendance. Many other lonely experts had also attended the banquet. As for those sects in the wilderness, only a few extremely strong sects managed to attend the banquet, while those that failed to attend still sent gifts nonetheless. The banquet was lively and lasted for a full day and night before everyone started leaving. The territorial lord mansion was quiet once again. In the magnificent hall, Jian Wushuang sat there leaning on an armchair while Xiao Tiexin and Song Heng stood in front of him. "Shiner, have you recorded all those gifts from the clans and sects?" Jian Wushuang asked. Xiao Tiexin nodded before slowly said, "Yes, I've counted them. First of all, the cultivation resources include elixirs, various ground treasures, and heavenly treasures. There are also some divine weapons and armor, with all added up to more than 2,400,000 primordial stones." Jian Wushuang was stunned by the surprise. "Furthermore, perhaps the news has spread far and wide that you prefer primordial stone, hence those clans and sects of each wilderness sent a very large number of primordial stone, which are much more than cultivation resources. They are worth 6,800,000 primordial stones altogether." Xiao Tiexin said. 6,800,000? That much? Jian Wushuang exclaimed and suddenly stood up. Yes, it was quite a lot. A total of 6,800,000. Even their total assets of top-tier clans like Shi clan, Wu clan, and Situ clan, excluding the Earth Ultimate Gods behind them, were estimated to be only about 4 to 5 million primordial stones. He simply held a banquet after becoming the territorial lord, and the results were gifts from those clans and sects which added up to 6,800,000 of primordial stones, which were worth much more than assets of those top-tier clans. If he counted the cultivation resources, which were worth about 2,400,000 primordial stones, there were nearly 10 million primordial stones. He got nearly 10 million primordial stones in one go from just a single banquet. No wonder so many people wanted the territorial lord position. What a great feeling to be a despot, murmured Jianghu Shuang. There were so many wildernesses under northern Darkstar territory. Take the Wuxia wilderness as an example. The Great Compassion sect was the most powerful sect among the many sects in Wuxia wilderness, and they paid up 1,000 primordial stones every 1,000 years. The amount paid by those smaller sects might not be as much as the Great Compassionate sect, but were still worth a few hundred primordial stones for each of the sections. Each wilderness would have to pay around 20,000 to 30,000 primordial stones every 1,000 years after adding up every big and small sect. The total amount added up from the many wildernesses was probably 7 million to 8 million primordial stones. It should be more after including those clans within the northern Darkstar territory. Although it was only a banquet held by the new territorial lord and not the real levy, those clans and sects were more generous, as it was the first time they offered gifts to the new territorial lord. This was why Jianghu Shuang received a huge sum of nearly 10 million primordial stones. Chapter 2586. The top high-level ultimate god. Put those cultivation resources aside for the time being. We now have 6,800,000 of primordial stones alone, plus the 300,000 left behind by San Shouwang and the 200,000 each from the Shi clan and the Wu clan. Altogether, there are a whopping 7,500,000 primordial stones. Jianghu Shuang's eyes were shining bright. There were so many primordial stones. If he could absorb and refine all of them, then his strength would skyrocket. Breakthrough to high-level Ultimate God Realm is not a problem at all, but I'm not sure if I could break through to peak Ultimate God Realm? Jianghu Shuang held his hands, his heart fluttered with high anticipation. Shiner and Commander Songheng, I need to go into seclusion for some time. Both of you will handle the matters on the Territorial Lord Mansion and official army. Don't come to me if there's nothing important, ordered Jianghu Shuang. Yes. Both Xiao Tiexin and Songheng nodded their heads. Jianghu Shuang soon arrived alone at the underground palace. The underground palace was huge and extremely well hidden, with its surrounding area also heavily guarded. It was an excellent place for cultivating in seclusion. Jianghu Shuang sat down cross-legged and waved his hand as countless primordial stones appeared in front of him. Jianghu Shuang's eyes were sparkling in excitement upon looking at those primordial stones. Let's start. A gush of terrifying power erupted from Jianghu Shuang and engulfed the primordial stone as though devouring them. Jianghu Shuang began to absorb and refine these primordial stones. Time was slowly slipping away. His speed in refining the primordial stones too had increased tremendously upon Jianghu Shuang's breakthrough to primary level ultimate god. It used to take him 3 months to refine those 500,000 primordial stones he obtained from the Dark Thunder territory. At that instance, there were a total of 7,500,000 primordial stones placed in front of him, which was 15 times more than the previous 500,000. It was only natural for him to take a much longer time. Took him 3 years. A total of 3 full years before he had finally completely refined the 7,500,000 primordial stones. His cultivation realm had also progressed from primary level ultimate god to high level ultimate god by then. He had reached the very limits of high level ultimate god. He was only a small step away from reaching peak ultimate god. It's a pity there were too many primordial stones to refine, and the effect from the refinery reduced toward the end. I thought that these 7,500,000 primordial stones could allow me to hit the peak ultimate god realm, but now it seems a bit too whimsical, murmured Jianghu Shuang. Although primordial stones contained extremely pure divine powers, Jianghu Shuang's ability to refine and absorb the divine powers within those stones had reduced as his realm progressed. Its absorption effect got worse the higher his realm became. Unfortunately, that was the case when he had reached a high-level ultimate god. Likewise, primordial stones would be less and less useful to him in the future once he crossed into the Earth ultimate god realm, such that its effect would be negligible. Refining primordial stones alone could no longer meet his needs. He would have to find something with purer and more powerful divine powers than the primordial stones if he chose to continue refining divine powers to improve his realm in the future. Although I could not directly break through and reach the peak ultimate god realm, it's still good to reach the very limits of high-level ultimate god. At least it saved me a lot of cultivation time and divine powers accumulation. I've spent a lot of effort in killing San Shouwang and it's finally worth it since I've become the new territorial lord. My only regret is that I didn't get the stately painting from San Shouwang. Jianwu Shuang squinted slightly. The stately painting was his prized possession and also the real reason for him to target San Shouwang. It was a pity the stately painting fell into the star-picking pavilion's hands. 3 years have passed and there are only 8 more years before the 11 years time frame. In these 8 years, I have to get ready besides improving my strength as much as possible, murmured Jianwu Shuang. He had made another cultivation realm breakthrough from a primary level ultimate god and made it into the peak of the high-level ultimate god realm. His overall strength had improved a lot and he was no longer worried even if he faced a peak Earth ultimate god. The auction event 8 years later at Star Picking Pavilion was extremely large with countless experts participating in the auction that even heaven ultimate gods might be attending the event. If Jianwu Shuang wanted to recover the stately painting which used to be his from the auction, he must be capable in terms of both wealth and strength. His strength at that time was still somewhat insufficient. I should meditate slowly. Jianwu Shuang closed his eyes again. Time flew past. In Jianwu Shuang's previous life at Eternal Chaotic World, there was no restriction from the heavenly way and almost no concept of time there. Take anyone from the chaotic realm as an example, they had probably lived from millions of years to more than 10 million years which made all of them extremely old. Like those ancient experts who were in hibernation, they had lived from ancient times to the second era with their lifespan beyond anyone's imagination. His current life in the ancient god domain was completely under the will of heavenly ways control with a completely different time concept. The lifespan of a cultivator was limited as lifespans of a powerful ultimate god was far less than a chaotic realm in the eternal chaotic world. Jianwu Shuang even wondered if the passing time in the ancient god domain was similar to the eternal chaotic world. Could it be that a year in the ancient god domain equated to 10 or even 100 years in the eternal chaotic world? Of course, he only suspected the possibility but was unsure of it. Jianwu Shuang had officially become the Northern Dark Star Territorial Lord for 10 years. In the past 10 years, apart from Jianwu Shuang staying in the underground palace for the first 3 years to absorb and refine primordial stones, he spent the other 7 years very casually. He spent some time cultivating while other times eating and drinking with ordinary people. He even spent some time sleeping and wandering around the Northern Dark Star territory. For him, those activities were part of his cultivation. Staying in seclusion to achieve enlightenment was not necessarily the best cultivation method. There was a lake in a huge land within the Territorial Lord Mansion and Jianwu Shuang could be seen dressed in gold while fishing peacefully on the lake with a fish basket beside him. Not far away, Xiao Tiexin and another 2 maids stood quietly without saying a word. The entire mansion seemed extremely quiet. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the edge of the land. It was Song Heng. At his first glance, Song Heng saw Jianwu Shuang fishing peacefully in the middle of the lake and dared not immediately disturb Jianwu Shuang. Instead, he went to Xiao Tiexin's side. Chapter 2587. The Change in the Wilderness. Miss Sheener, how long has the Territorial Lord been fishing there? Song Heng asked. It has been many days. Is there something urgent for Commander Song Heng to come in such a hurry? Shall I wake Master up? Xiao Tiexin asked. No, although something came up, it's nothing too urgent. Let's just wait a little longer, suggested Song Heng. Xiao Tiexin slightly nodded. All of them could observe that though Jianwu Shuang seemed to be fishing, he had closed his eyes in apparent meditation. They would not dare to disturb Jianwu Shuang unless it was something urgent since he was in a state of meditation for enlightenment. Half an hour passed since they waited. Finally, Jianwu Shuang, who was in the middle of the lake, battered his eyelids. He suddenly lifted his right hand which was holding the fishing rod while tracing a special and weird drawing in the void. After that, a 2-meter-long snow scomber fish dropped into the water. All of that was done in a smooth and slick movement. The weirdest part was the complete lack of movement when such a big snow scomber fish was caught out of water. Not even a ripple. The fish was caught and dropped into the fish basket which looked small but it was spacious inside. Jianwu Shuang retracted the fishing rod and only then did the lake's surface popped with water splashing everywhere and created big ripples. Is that an illusion of spacetime? Both Xiao Tiexin and Song Heng, who was waiting quietly on the empty ground not far away, were shocked to see the scene. They could see when the snow scomber fish was caught ashore, the lake's movement should have happened at the same time, but Jianwu Shuang delayed the movement and caused it to happen one after another. It was caused by the power of spacetime. The Territorial Lord's perception of the spacetime law is getting better and better. Song Heng exclaimed. Indeed. It's not only his perception of spacetime law but also many other aspects. Master is getting stronger and better at an astonishing speed, said Xiao Tiexing. She had been around Jian Wushuang. Although Jian Wushuang had not taken action in recent years, she could still sense Jian Wushuang's improving strength. Jian Wushuang stood up while holding the fishing rod and fish basket with the snow scomber fish. He slowly stepped across the lake and walked towards the two. Xiao Tiexing and Song Heng both had their eyes on Jian Wushuang. From their point of view, Jian Wushuang seemed to be just an ordinary person and did not exude an aura nor gave any special impressions. However, the two were more horrified by how ordinary he appeared. A few years ago they could vaguely see through Jian Wushuang's power and were able to judge his strength. They were still able to read how much stronger Jian Wushuang was compared to them at that time. However, they could no longer see absolutely anything. Jian Wushuang was like an unfathomable ball of mist. Finally, Jian Wushuang walked to the shore and faced the two of them. Territorial Lord. Song Heng respectfully saluted. Commander Song Heng, are you here to see me for something? Jian Wushuang smiled. Something has happened and it's out of the official army's control. That's the reason I'm here to request the master to come along, said Song Heng. Oh. Jian Wushuang was surprised. He knew of the official army's combat powers. 10 official army battalions had a total of 10,000 soldiers. If they were well organized, a single battalion was enough to even suppress a primary-level ultimate god. If 2 or 3 battalions worked together at the same time, even an ordinary high-level Earth ultimate god would want to escape. Their combat power was terrifying. On normal occasions, the official army would be the one handling the crisis if there was any disorder or commotion in northern Darkstar territory. However, what's the matter that even the official army can't handle it? Jian Wushuang peeked around at them. This happened in Qinhuo Wilderness. Not long ago, a mysterious expert appeared in Qinhuo Wilderness, used extremely cruel methods to annihilate several cities, and killed a large number of cultivators. I heard those sects in Qinhuo Wilderness were frightened and immediately sent experts to kill that mysterious man. The sects formed a strong lineup of extremely powerful experts. However, those experts were defeated by him alone, with more than 90% of them died in the end. There were 4 primary-level ultimate gods among them. There's no sign of him stopping after that. Song Heng wore a solemn expression and said, the powerful sects of Qinhuo Wilderness knew that their sect's combined power is unable to kill the demon. Therefore they sent a message to ask for the official army's help. We believe that man is probably someone mighty at the peak ultimate god, so we did not take it lightly and sent 2 battalions to kill him, but the 2 commanders just sent a message today. The 2 commanders said that the demon's strength has reached the Earth ultimate god realm for some reason and is extremely clever with his combat techniques. He avoids facing head-on with the official army, hence the official army can't do anything to him nor can they stop his killing spree. That's why the official army sent a message to request more help. I thought that it was strange after I received the news. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly upon listening to Song Heng. He said after some time, it's indeed weird not only about the part of him killing so many cultivators but also his cultivation realm was being a mystery. If I'm not mistaken, the sects initially notice he isn't that powerful when they attack him. The official army probably also thought the same and probably thought that they had the capabilities to handle him. Before the official army started, they thought the opponent was just a peak ultimate god, but the opponent has reached the Earth ultimate god level. Besides, he's extremely clever with his attack, which made it abnormal. The strangest part is the fact that we know almost nothing about the demon, including his origins. That's right, we don't know how to deal with him, so I'm to see Master, Song Heng solemnly agreed. Jian Wushuang groaned for a moment before saying, if that's the case, go with me to the Qinhuo Wilderness now. Territorial Lord, you want to personally go? Song Heng was quite surprised. The Qinhuo Wilderness is within Northern Darkstar Territory's control. I cannot sit and do nothing as the Territorial Lord when there's such a big commotion. Besides, the demon's strength is so terrifying that I'm afraid that even the official army is unable to handle him. Jian Wushuang smiled. Shiner, come with me too. We have been in this Territorial Lord mansion for 10 years. It's time to go out for a walk. Yes. Xiao Tiexing nodded. Jian Wushuang, Xiao Tiexing, and Song Heng thereafter headed toward the Qinhuo Wilderness. Chapter 2588. Sole Expert. Qinhuo Wilderness was merely an ordinary wilderness within northern Darkstar territory. In a huge ancient forest, there was a dense camp where 2 official army battalion soldiers and the experts from various sects gathered. They were waiting ever since receiving news that Jian Wushuang would be visiting in person. It did not take long before 3 figures came from the distant void and arrived in the camp. Territorial Lord. A pleasure to meet the territorial lord. The two commanders and sect masters saluted with a bow. Emo Shan, what's the current situation? Jian Wushuang looked at a middle-aged man who was burly like a hill. As the territorial lord, Jian Wushuang usually kept in touch with the 10 official army commanders and he knew all of them. Territorial lord, the demon has been staying in the ancient forest in front for all this time, said the middle-aged man called Emo Shan. Jian Wushuang looked at the ancient forest in front of him. The ancient forest was so vast that one could not see the end with the naked eye. Jian Wushuang immediately frowned. How can you be sure he's still in the forest? There are exits everywhere around the forest, yet the official army and various sects experts are gathered in this camp. That person can leave at any time. We can't stop it if he can leave any time as he wishes, but that is not the case. Territorial lord, please come with me, said Emo Shan. Emo Shan led the way with Jian Wushuang trailing behind him. The group of people soon arrived at a huge pit around the campsite and saw all the corpses in the pit that were kept in good condition without any scars on their surface while standing by the pothole. Jian Wushuang's face sank. Song Heng's and Xiao Taixin's complexion turned ugly next to Jian Wushuang. There were just too many corpses in the pit. There were nearly 200 and judging from the remaining divine power on those 200 corpses, the weakest was a peak divine demon whereas the stronger ones were primary level ultimate god. There were even 2 high-level ultimate gods among them, the sacrificed official army soldiers. So many official army soldiers are dead? Song Heng's voice was low when he looked at Emo Shan. You did not mention this when you sent me a message earlier. I knew we had lost quite a few people before this but I don't have the specific numbers. That's why I didn't report to you. The situation here is indeed very urgent, said Emo Shan. These corpses are kept intact with no traces of external scars. They grimaced in pain before their death and probably suffered painful tortures before death. If I'm not mistaken, these are soul attacks. Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice. Emo Shan nodded. Yes, it's a soul attack. These men from the official army are not the only ones who died as there are also people in the cities who were massacred by the demon before including experts from Jianghu wilderness sects who died in the demon's hands. Many of them had also not sustained any physical injuries, but had painful horrific expressions and died from soul attacks. The demon should be an expert who's extremely good at very terrible soul attacks. It's for certain that he's currently well hidden in the ancient forest ahead. The reason he didn't choose to leave is that the 2 battalions can do anything to him at all. It's him who's preying upon us instead of us keeping an eye on him. Emo Shan trembled in helplessness upon saying that. Preying on the official army? Song Heng's gaze turned cold. This seems to be the case. Jian Wushuang stared carefully at the official army soldiers' corpses in the pit and said with a low voice, Let's call the expert who's good at soul attacks the demon for the time being. He went around on a killing spree in the cities before killing the experts from Jianghu wilderness sects and the official army. During this process, his strength is constantly getting stronger at an amazing speed according to the information you previously reported. In addition to the painful expressions on these people when they died, I guess they weren't attacked and killed by a soul attack but probably had their souls forcibly ripped or consumed. Soul ripped or consumed? The people's faces around them changed upon hearing that. The demon's strength must be very strong if I'm not mistaken. It's not as simple as it seems now. Something may have happened. Perhaps he's severely injured in a fight or had to pay a huge price after using a secret technique and severely damaged his strength. He's probably in an extremely weakened state and could only recover his strength by consuming these cultivators' souls. His strength has gradually recovered as he consumed more soul, hence getting stronger and stronger. He no longer wanted to kill, absorb, and devour those weak cultivators' soul power in the cities as his strength is restored. That's probably why he focuses on those who have stronger soul power. Therefore he gave up on ordinary city cultivators and started targeting the various sects experts. When the official army arrived, he switched his focus on them instead, said Jian Wushuang. Is that so? All the people present were stunned. Emo Shan, you have fought against him before. How is his strength? Jian Wushuang asked. When we confronted him head-on, his combat power had reached the rank of a primary-level ultimate god and was using very powerful techniques. We only managed to slightly suppress him when 2 battalions formed a military formation to fight against him, said Emo Shan. As for his soul attack, we could not easily judge as his soul attack is of little significance to our military formation, so he has never performed a soul attack on us. Those soldiers who were unfortunate to receive a soul attack from him were all dead. If I'm not wrong, all of you fought against him before these soldiers died, right? Jian Wushuang pointed to the many corpses in the pit. Emo Shan nodded. Yes. We had a fierce battle against him and suppressed him before he flees into the forest. It's too difficult to find him as the forest was too vast while he was alone in there. The official army could only spread out and search for him, but it turned out. As a result, the soldiers were defeated and killed one by one, with you losing quite a few soldiers? Jian Wuxuang looked over. Yes, it's too late when I finally realized and immediately asked the soldiers to get into military formations again. However, the demon still managed to kill quite a number of us, even though only less than half were separated. Emo Shan blamed himself. Chapter 2589. Have a death wish? Jian Wuxuang glanced at Emo Shan but did not mean to blame him. Emo Shan had been quite alert and reacted promptly after all. The demon has the combat power of a primary-level Earth Ultimate God and was able to battle head-on with the military formation formed by 2 battalions. However, his strength must have become stronger after consuming the soul power of so many soldiers. If he's allowed to continue his killing spree and consume the souls so unscrupulously, I'm afraid he'll soon be peerless in northern Darkstar territory, said Jian Wuxuang in a low voice. After a while he made a decision. All of you stay here. I'll go handle the demon myself, said Jian Wuxuang directly. Territorial Lord, are you going alone? Song Heng frowned. Territorial Lord, that demon especially with soul attack is very powerful. Emo Shan reminded Jian Wuxuang. Master. Xiao Tiexin also looked over with a worried expression. Don't worry, just leave it to me. Jian Wuxuang smiled confidently as his figure moved and had already swept toward the ancient forest ahead alone. Song Heng, Emo Shan, and others stayed there as they were told. Do you think the Territorial Lord can kill that demon? Emo Shan asked in a strange tone. Master is very cautious. He must be sure since he dared to go alone. Even if he can't kill the demon probably can't do any harm to him either. Don't forget the Master is our Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord, said Xiao Tiexin. That's right. The Territorial Lord is very powerful. Emo Shan nodded. The others also had a lot of confidence in Jian Wuxuang. The Territorial Lord was the top expert in Northern Darkstar territory after all, and even if the Territorial Lord could not do anything to the demon must be completely peerless in the Northern Darkstar territory. In the vast ancient forest, Jian Wuxuang slowly advanced dressed in a golden robe and carrying a long sword. He had fully displayed his soul power, which covered a large area around him in search of the demon's traces. However, the ancient forest was huge and Jian Wuxuang needed time to search the entire forest by himself. Moreover, Jian Wuxuang might not even be able to find him if the demon was nearby and did not take the initiative to show up. An expert who is good at soul attack was capable of hiding his breath of power after all. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wuxuang had spent most of the day walking around in the ancient forest. Inside an underground cave that was made recently deep in the ancient forest, there was a thin old man in a black robe with a cold expression sitting in there quietly as a golden bead was suspended in the void in front of him. The golden bead was a soul golden bead which contained a lot of soul power. Soul power that was forcibly extracted from those official army soldiers. The soul power was gushing out from the golden bead and refined before the old man absorbed them. The color of the soul golden bead dimmed with moments. The cold-looking old man opened his eyes with a wicked smile appearing on his face. Peak Earth Ultimate God. My soul power has finally recovered to Peak Earth Ultimate God realm. It's not very far from my peak. My soul power should be fully recovered so long I can kill the remaining official army and absorb their soul power. I don't need to stay in such a small place to absorb these divine demon and ordinary ultimate God soul power anymore when that happens. I have to be more careful and don't provoke those 2 people again until I've recovered. Otherwise, the cold-looking old man held his hands together. As Jian Wuxuang speculated, the cold-looking old man was indeed someone mighty. He was a real heaven ultimate god. Unfortunately, he was an assassination target not long ago and had to use some secret techniques to save his life. Due to that, his strength was drastically reduced, which led to him needing to absorb a large amount of soul power to recover his strength. His soul power had since been restored to the peak ultimate god realm. At that cultivation realm, he was almost peerless in any ordinary stellar region. Suddenly, the cold-looking old man abruptly raised his head and moved his eyes as though he was surprised. He noticed someone had broken into the area covered by his soul power and was searching for him using their soul power but unfortunately could not find him. This person is a bit weird. I can't even sense his strength. The cold-looking man instantly became vigilant and carefully observed the person. A golden robe? Carrying a long sword? He's not one of the 2 who chased after me before and is dressed like the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord mentioned by the official army, isn't he? Yes, he's indeed the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord. The old man smiled. He overheard the official army soldiers talking about Jian Wushuang when they scattered around and searched for him. He was almost certain that the person was indeed Jian Wushuang from knowing some of Jian Wushuang's appearance and characteristics before seeing the actual person appearing in his soul power's range. The Territorial Lord is nothing more than just an Earth Ultimate God. If he came a little earlier when my soul power has not recovered to the Earth Ultimate God realm, he'll probably be a big threat to me, but now, he's no different than someone who came to die. The cold-looking old man coldly smiled. Earth Ultimate God? At his peak he would never pay attention to one. Even when he had yet recovered his strength at his peak, he was no longer threatened by regular or even a high-level Earth Ultimate God. Naturally, he was not bothered by the mere Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord. I hear those soldiers said the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord seems to have an amazing protective armor which is suspected to be in the ranks of a heavenly treasure. The cold-looking old man smiled menacingly as his figure flashed and floated out toward the ground above. On the ground, Jian Wushuang was sauntering forward. After half of the day, his soul power did not detect the demon's slightest trace, but he was unperturbed. He believed in his judgment where the demon needed to absorb a large amount of cultivator's soul power to recover his strength and must still have remained in the ancient forest. He was uncertain if the demon dared to appear and face him. Suddenly, there were no signs or warnings such that even Jian Wushuang did not sense anything. A tyrannical soul power came sweeping by. The soul attack was strange and done silently before Jian Wushuang could do anything. The mighty soul power had already broken into his body and brutally attacked the soul within his sea of consciousness. Chapter 2590, Zhonghun Boom. A terrifying soul attack penetrated Jian Wushuang's soul like an awl. Jian Wushuang's soul was surrounded by a small transparent tower. The small tower was the exquisite pagoda. As one of the Seven Stars Black Sect's 5 secret techniques, the exquisite pagoda was great at defending against soul attacks. In addition, Jian Wushuang had also managed to cultivate the exquisite pagoda secret technique 2nd level, hence its power was naturally even greater. The all-like soul attack that frontally bombarded the exquisite pagoda made the transparent exquisite pagoda shake violently for a while before quickly stopping. On the outside, Jian Wushuang's figure was only slightly shaken before he calmed down almost instantly. Jian Wushuang turned around and looked at a void next to him. He sensed the tyrannical soul attack was coming from that direction. A high-level ultimate god who lacked a good soul attack defense method would be unable to resist such a horrifying soul attack. The person who performed the soul attack was undoubtedly the demon. A cold-looking thin old man who was dressed in a black robe slowly appeared in Jian Wushuang's line of sight as expected. I must say the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord is quite capable for you to survive the sudden soul attack just now. The cold-looking old man smiled strangely. Your soul power attack is extremely powerful. If I'm not mistaken, your main soul power has reached the limits of a high-level Earth Ultimate God or even the peak Earth Ultimate God level. My Northern Darkstar territory is just a small stellar region with no one as powerful as you in soul attacks. Who are you? Jian Wushuang asked coldly. I'm Zhonghun. You don't have to know who I am and where I'm from. The cold-looking old man smiled evilly and stared at Jian Wushuang. Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord, you shouldn't have come in fact. My original intention is to absorb some cultivator's soul power to restore my strength. I'll leave as soon as my strength is restored. I've no interest in your small and ordinary Northern Darkstar territory. If you have turned a blind eye on this, you'll at most lose some official army soldiers, which won't be too serious. Why do you have to come and dig your own grave now? Dig my own grave? I don't think so, chided Jian Wushuang coldly. You don't think so? You'll know it soon. The evil-spirited Zhonghun had a faint trace of cold fire burning in his eyes. He flipped his palm and a black spear appeared in his hand. The black spear exuded an incomparably evil and very terrifying cold aura. It was a genuine heavenly treasure. As Zhonghun's figure moved, his phantom-like figure floated and appeared in front of Jian Wushuang in the blink of an eye. The spear in his hand drew out a layer of black power before forming a black whirlpool in the void's edge which went straight toward Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang could feel an extremely amazing power coming from the spear. The power was even stronger than when San Shouwang exhausted his strength. Not only is his soul attacks extremely good, but his weapon offenses aren't weak either. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed slightly and immediately withdrew the Blood Mountain sword behind him. Clang! A tyrannical force exploded when the sword light clashed with the black spear frontally and caused the black whirlpool around the black spear to disappear immediately before the spear sank downward. A terrifying soul attack attacked Jian Wushuang fiercely once again upon the two weapons' collision. The impact was much stronger than his previous soul attack. The exquisite pagoda shook violently in Jian Wushuang's sea of consciousness. Is it uncomfortable? Zhong Hun smiled ominously. Umph. Jian Wushuang snorted coldly as the sword light in his hand was divided into three and instantly shot out. Zhong Hun was unafraid. Although he was best at soul attacks, his weapon offenses and face-to-face combat ability were not weak either. Even though his strength had yet to recover to its peak, his face-to-face combat abilities were top among the high-level Earth Ultimate God. Zhong Hun fought head-on with Jian Wushuang with his black spear constantly colliding with the Blood Mountain sword as the two were equally matched. During the heated fight, Zhong Hun's spear along with his terrifying soul attack repeatedly bombarded Jian Wushuang. The exquisite pagoda in Jian Wushuang's sea of consciousness continued to endure the repeated soul attacks. The incessant soul attacks caused the exquisite pagoda to shake violently, but there were still no signs of damage. Jian Wushuang's soul did not suffer any substantial damage. That was the exquisite pagoda's power. The powerful soul defensive ability completely blocked Zhong Hun's soul attacks. Zhong Hun was quite casual at first as he fought Jian Wushuang without much effort. However, he noticed Jian Wushuang kept a straight face, which made his eyes slightly sink as they repeatedly fought head-on. My soul power has been restored to the level of peak Earth Ultimate God, not to mention him using my full strength in the soul attacks. Even if the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord's soul power has reached the level of a peak Earth Ultimate God, it shouldn't still be as good after so many attacks. How come there doesn't seem to be any damage at all? Perhaps he has a soul defensive treasure on his body or practiced some sort of soul defensive secret technique. Zhong Hun murmured. Suddenly his face turned extremely cold. A majestic soul power erupted. The soul power was not only huge and vast but also formed a tangible substance that enshrouded the world. In an instant, it had completely covered the surrounding void in Jian Wushuang before forming a huge soul world. This is soul world? Jian Wushuang was shocked. Cultivators who had practiced sword principle, saber principle, and other principles could form a principle world after reaching a certain level of enlightenment. A cultivator who was good at soul attacks and purely studied the soul principle could also build his soul world. The soul world's power was not weaker than a principle world but seemed a little strange and weird. Zhong Hun displayed a complete soul world. Jian Wushuang kept a straight face and he also displayed a huge sword world. Sword world. Zhong Hun looked at the crazy sword intent and sneered coldly. It's useless. You're just an Earth Ultimate God no matter what, and your understanding of principles can't be that high either. With your sword world probably reached the level of merit. How can you compete with my soul world at the profound achievement? Break for me. Zhong Hun controlled his vast soul world and madly crashed it on Jian Wushuang's sword world. Chapter 2591. Oppression of the World Rumbling? Under the vast soul power's impact, the sky-filled sword intent began to slowly fade away. Soul world at the profound achievement? This guy is definitely a heaven ultimate god in his peak. Jian Wushuang's heart was heavy. Every improvement step in principle world was extremely difficult. Likewise, Jian Wushuang had finally set up his very own sword world more than 10 years ago. At that time he was only capable of displaying the introductory level. 10 years after he killed San Shouwang and became the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord, his greatest improvement was his sword principle understanding, but it only allowed him to progress from the introductory level to the merit level. In fact, he barely crossed over into the merit level. This was because of his exceptionally high capabilities in understanding principle. He had a couple of enlightenment in the process which sped up his progress. An ordinary cultivator probably needed a long time to do the same. Most Earth Ultimate Gods only managed to achieve the introductory level in Principle World with only a few top-tier high achievers capable of reaching the merit level. Jian Wushuang was one of those few. Only Heaven Ultimate Gods could reach the profound achievement in Principle World. In fact, many weaker Heaven Ultimate Gods or those at the lower tier were unable to achieve that level. The soul world displayed by Zhong Hun was similar to a Principle World, albeit slightly weirder. In that sense, only a Heaven Ultimate God was capable of displaying a profound achievement soul world. Jian Wushuang sneered, "It's shameful for a Heaven Ultimate God like you to come to a small stellar region like the Northern Darkstar Territory and absorb soul power from cultivators to recover your strength. You really are miserable. Regardless, you are not in your peak state now. Do you think you can crush me with your soul world alone? You must be dreaming." As soon as you said that, Jian Wushuang's eyes flashed with a cold sword light. Boom, boom, boom. Countless stronger sword intent than he previously displayed appeared. Jian Wushuang no longer reserved his strength as his 100,000-mile sword world was completely displayed. That terrifying sword intent swept around wildly from its sudden power surge and crashed on the soul world. The palpable soul power that filled heaven and earth quickly disappeared like the tides. It was being compressed to what seemed like a small area. How can it be? Zhonghun was shocked. A merit-level sword world has suppressed my profound achievement soul world? How wide is his sword world? 80,000 miles? 90,000 miles? No, even a 90,000-mile sword world cannot possibly achieve this effect. Is it possible his sword world has reached the ultimate distance? Zhonghun was shocked. He believed Jian Wushuang's sword world had likely reached the ultimate distance, which was 99,999 miles. However, it was still an understatement. Jian Wushuang's sword world was the most perfect 100,000-mile sword world. The perfect sword world was much stronger than the so-called ultimate sword world. Boom. The sky-filled sword intent continued to engulf Zhonghun's soul world and shrunk it again until it almost collapsed. Oh God! Zhonghun was terrified and at the same time felt an unprecedented shocking force on him. He was a heaven ultimate god who had seen countless powerful experts. The principal world displayed was very impressive and had a powerful deterrent effect. However, he had never experienced something of a similar deterrent effect. The huge sword world enveloped Jian Wushuang as he had also made a move. Wow! The icy dazzling sword light slashed out and destroyed everything that crossed its path. Zhonghun finally took it seriously as used the spear in his hand to instantly parry the sword light. However, his strength was greatly weakened from the sword world's oppression. Clang! There was a crisp sound as the black spear was slewed by the sword light. Jian Wushuang's long sword took the opportunity to thrust forward with its blade aimed directly at Zhonghun's neck, like harvesting wheat. Zhonghun's face sank and abruptly retreated. During his retreat, he stretched out his right hand and pointed towards the void ahead. Soul Devil Hell. Buzz. The vast soul power burst out frantically. The soul power was as vast as the sea. In the blink of an eye, the void turned into a huge 100-foot-tall demon shadow with 3 heads and 6 arms. Each of the strong 6 arms was holding a thick black soul chain. After it took shape, what? The demon shadow's arms swung those 3 chains and slammed fiercely toward Jian Wushuang's sword shadow. Jian Wushuang was immediately forced to retreat. Just when he regained his foothold, the vast soul formed again on both sides of the voids around him as 2 similar 100-feet-tall statues with 3 heads and 6 arms each holding a black soul chain formed. There are 3 demon shadows with each having 6 black soul chains, a total of 18 soul chains. In an instant, swash, 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 swash. The soul chains frantically waved and attacked Jian Wushuang concurrently from 3 directions. Jian Wushuang also immediately waved his long sword to ward off the attacks, throwing the chain out and away from him. Just as he knocked those chains away, Zhonghun melted into the surrounding void filled with a large amount of soul power and had completely turned into darkness. Jian Wushuang immediately spread his soul power as he disappeared. Although Jian Wushuang could feel Zhonghun was still somewhere in the surrounding void, his exact location could not be found. I must say that Zhonghun is quite good. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed. Zhonghun was well hidden in one of the voids among the surrounding dark voids. He stared closely toward Jian Wushuang who was fighting frantically with the 3 demon shadows in the dark void center. I've looked down on this northern Darkstar territorial lord and didn't expect his strength to be so great, forcing me to use Soul Devil Hell. It seems my Soul Devil Hell can't do much harm to him with my current recovered soul power, murmured Zhonghun. He could see that the 3 demon shadows were showing terrifying power with the 18 soul chains also launching incessant attacks on Jian Wushuang. However, Jian Wushuang with his sword and sword world that seamlessly complemented his strength managed to knock the 18 soul chains. The 3 demon shadows were unable to gain the slightest advantage against Jian Wushuang, let alone to kill Jian Wushuang. The only way to wipe him out is probably that trick. Chapter 2592. Wiping out the soul. Zhonghun was hesitating. He was a genuine heaven ultimate god and good at soul attacks. He had many techniques but yet to fully recover his soul power which was merely at the peak earth ultimate god realm. Therefore, most of his techniques' full strength could not be displayed. For example, the Soul Devil Hell which he displayed did not harm Jian Wushuang. Based on his current strength, there was only one technique he was able to display confidently to kill the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord. The only concern remains in the extreme difficulty of using that technique at his current strength level, hence his hesitation. The Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord is only a primary level Earth Ultimate God, but his combat power is very impressive. Especially in the principal world, he has opened up the ultimate sword world. Such a genius must have previously obtained some useful and valuable opportunities, with the opportunities probably being kept in his interspatial ring. I suspect his armor has also reached the heavenly treasure level. Jianghu was secretly groaning. Although using that technique is very taxing when I'm already in such a serious injury state and my not completely recovered strength, I can always absorb more cultivator's soul power. Let's do it. Jianghu decided with a sharp light shone in his eyes. The surging soul power rose in an instant and very obviously became as vast as the sea. It immediately began to compress at an astonishing speed after its emergence and formed a black halo in the blink of an eye. He then violently slapped his forehead between his eyebrows and spat out 2 drops of bright red blood essence. The 2 drops of blood essence integrated into the black halo and instantly skyrocketed his divine power breath. Secret technique, God's punishment. Jianghu screamed in his heart as a dark soul beam burst out from the black halo. The soul power contained in the soul beam was terrifying. After the beam was unleashed, Jianghu's complexion instantly turned pale, but a glimpse of a grin could be seen in his eyes. Jianghu had to pay a huge price to unleash that blow. It was the strongest move he could use at that time, with its power comparable to a soul attack he could display at his peak. It also meant that the blow was an attack of the Heaven Ultimate God level. I don't believe you can survive this blow. Jianghu was confident. The soul beam zoomed across the void. The surrounding became quiet as though there were no movements at all. Jianghu had been combating the 3 huge demon shadows which did not harm him. At the same time, he had been vigilantly keeping an eye on the surrounding void and knew the hiding Jianghu in the surrounding void might cast a soul attack on him at any time. The soul beam swept toward Jianghu as expected. Jianghu was startled, with no techniques he could use to ward off the soul attack. He could only depend on the exquisite pagoda in his sea of consciousness to withstand the attack. Boom! The terrifying soul beam blasted fiercely on the exquisite pagoda as the pagoda wildly shook and almost gave way. The soul beam suddenly evolved. It was originally a beam but quickly turned into a soul spear that was so sharp it pierced a hole through the exquisite pagoda. A hole that exposed Jianghu's soul to the soul spear. Oops. Jianghu's expression drastically changed. Boom. The soul spear carried a shocking power and bombarded Jianghu's soul. Jianghu's soul was not strong without the exquisite pagoda's protection. His cultivation period in that lifetime was too short, and his cultivation realm was too low after all. He was only a high-level ultimate god, and so was his soul power level. His soul was only stronger and more tenacious than a similarly leveled cultivator because he was a perfect chaotic creature. However, no matter how tough his soul was, it was only a high-level ultimate god soul. How could he possibly withstand a heaven ultimate god soul attack? Jianghu's entire soul was instantly penetrated by the soul spear, which exuded a monstrous power and completely crushed Jianghu's soul. Jianghu's tangible soul was completely crushed and obliterated. Jianghu's figure completely stopped and suspended there. Jianghu, who was watching the entire scene in the surrounding dark void, wore a wide grin on his face. Indeed, he's just a primary level Earth ultimate god after all. Jianghu laughed and he wanted to move forward. He sensed Jianghu's soul had been completely wiped out, and it was impossible for one who was dead to die again. He had no scruples since Jianghu was dead. As his figure was about to move, he halted once again. He noticed Jianghu, who was dead with his soul completely wiped out in the void up front, opened his eyes again and looked straight at Jianghu with his cold eyes. What? Jianghu was stunned. Are you there? Jianghu's eyes were cold as he instantly applied the secret star technique. As soon as he used the secret technique, the divine power breath on his body instantly soared as his aura leaped from the primary level Earth Ultimate God to high level Earth Ultimate God under the Black Stone's disguise. At the same time, an infinite golden divine power swept out crazily before the 3,000 feet tall golden god shadow suddenly formed behind him. Jianghu made a move. A total of 300 apparitions were created at the same time with that single move that was located everywhere. The 3 demon shadows which were surrounding him could not tell which was the real Jianghu, as they could only frantically wave those black soul chains around and tried their best to attack the real Jianghu. Jianghu's real self went past those 3 demon shadows and aimed straight at Jianghu. This is impossible. Jianghu was flabbergasted as he did not expect that to happen. Based on his knowledge, it was impossible for the situation before to happen. The northern Darkstar territorial lord in front of him was dead with his soul completely penetrated, crushed, and obliterated. His soul was completely wiped out. Not even an undying saint with an immortal body was able to survive under those circumstances. However, he was alive. Jian Wushuang was still alive. His soul was obliterated, yet he was still alive and could still carry on attacking with his combat power barely affected. Chapter 2593, Kill. How on earth could he survive after his soul was completely wiped out? This territorial lord is strange. I'd better escape. Zhong Hun immediately thought of retreating upon seeing Jian Wushuang, who was launching an attack on him. He dared not shilly-shilly anymore and immediately turned around to flee. Suddenly, rumbling. In the blink of an eye, Zhong Hun and his surrounding void were completely covered by the sky-filling golden divine power ocean. A huge golden prison appeared out of thin air. It completely occluded the void, which was Zhong Hun's escape route, and crushed all hopes of his escape. Damn it! Zhong Hun finally panicked. He was once hunted down by 2 assassins when his strength was at its peak. At that time, he did not panic even when he was pushed to a dead end, as the situation at that time was different. He had an exit plan and a chance to escape, hence he managed to do so in the end. However, the golden prison's appearance placed him at a ghost of a chance to escape. Boom. The terrifying 100,000-mile sword world was fully displayed. As soon as Zhong Hun turned his head, he saw Jian Wushuang, who was some distance away, emerged right in front of him after a strange delusional move. It was so fast as though Jian Wushuang teleported himself. On the next second, Jian Wushuang wielded his sword. The Blood Mountain sword silently went forth as heaven and earth seemed to have completely overlapped with spacetime. A weird fleeting sword shadow burst into view and disappeared. Spacetime sword technique, 6th form. Overlapping shadow. How can it be so fast? Zhong Hun's eyes enlarged with his mouth wide open. However, after the sword shadow disappeared, so was his head, which flew out and away from his neck. Zhong Hun had not recovered from the shock, but his vitality had already begun to dissipate. As Zhong Hun's body fell feebly, the 3 huge demon shadows at his back had also disappeared into thin air. Jian Wushuang's golden prison had also slowly faded away as he recollected his divine power breath until the surrounding void finally calmed down. You're a heaven ultimate god who's exceptionally skillful with soul attacks. Even though you're injured and not at the peak of your power, you can still perform a heaven ultimate god level soul attack. Your attack is indeed powerful, but it's a pity you've met me, murmured Jian Wushuang as he stood towering over Zhong Hun's body. Zhong Hun's soul attack was indeed extremely powerful. Jian Wushuang's exquisite pagoda, which he had cultivated up to the 2nd level, was nonetheless still destroyed by Zhong Hun's soul attack. As a consequence, Jian Wushuang's soul was also obliterated by the soul attack's frontal penetration. Any ordinary expert would have died under such circumstances. However, Jian Wushuang was different. As the most unique and perfect chaotic creature in the world, the abilities he possessed were incomparable to ordinary cultivators. Although he was only at the ultimate god realm, he had an immortal body. His immortal body was even more powerful and perfect than an undying saint's. The immortal body of an undying saint could only rely on one's divine power to quickly restore the divine body. It had little use in recovering the soul. On the other hand, Jian Wushuang's immortal body was able to instantly restore his divine body as well as his soul. His soul had indeed been wiped out by Zhong Hun. However, he was able to recover his soul using his immortal Bodhis abilities. Such abilities were simply a fantasy among ordinary cultivators. Only perfect chaotic creatures had such abilities. Zhong Hun's soul attack was unquestionably powerful, and any ordinary Earth ultimate god would have died under his attack. However, Jian Wushuang survived with his perfect immortal body, which was a nemesis to any cultivator who was good at soul attacks. His body was able to perfectly reflect all types of soul attacks by any cultivator. In Jian Wushuang's case, attacks of the flesh might destroy him, but his body was impermeable to soul attack no matter how strong it was. A heaven ultimate god must be a top-tier expert in the Danyang holy domain. He must have quite a lot of wealth. Jian Wushuang's eyes flashed with a strange luster as he waved his large hand and annihilated Zhong Hun's body with a huge divine power before starting to count the items left behind by Zhong Hun. He was indeed wealthy as a heaven ultimate god. He had approximately 6 million to 7 million primordial stones left in his interspatial ring, but the more interesting part was his myriad of cultivation resources, secret techniques, treasures, and the like. Although Jian Wushuang was not able to estimate the values of those cultivation resources as well as Xiao Tiexin, he was still able to come up with a simple estimation. The various cultivation resources in Zhonghun's interspatial ring and the primordial stones should worth around 15 million primordial stones in total. In addition, Zhonghun also possessed some special treasures. Jian Wushuang flipped his hand as a black spear, black armor and ancient gray stone staff appeared in the void in front of him. Jian Wushuang knew the black spear which Zhonghun used to fight against him in the duel was a heavenly treasure offensive divine weapon. Its power was quite extraordinary. Meanwhile, the black armor which transformed from the black robe worn by Zhonghun was a heavenly treasure-level defensive armor. A defensive armor was 10 times more valuable than an offensive divine weapon of the same level. The heavenly treasure-level defensive armor was amazing. Previously, San Shouwang had decided to attack Jian Wushuang because of the heavenly treasure-level defensive armor on Jian Wushuang. Although both treasures were extremely unusual, they were of no use to Jian Wushuang. Needless to say, Jian Wushuang used a sword instead of a spear, while his golden glass armor, which was also his life armor, was more powerful than the black defensive armor. Moreover, the black defensive armor would become more inferior to the golden glass armor as his strength continued to improve. Jian Wushuang put the black spear and the black armor back into the interspatial ring with a wave of his hand before looking at the gray stone staff. The gray stone staff exuded an ancient aura breath with a vague layer of power surrounding the stone staff. It was soul power. Jian Wushuang could tell at a glance the gray stone staff was some sort of soul treasure. As soon Jian Wushuang took ownership of the gray stone staff, the message contained within was immediately channeled into his mind. It was a spiritual stone staff, an offensive divine soul weapon at the heavenly treasure level. Indeed, it's an offensive divine soul weapon at the heavenly treasure level. Jian Wushuang secretly admired. Soul treasure, regardless of an offensive or defensive divine soul weapon, was extremely rare and precious among treasures of the same level. For example, a heavenly treasure level defensive armor was 10 times more valuable than an offensive divine weapon of the same level. An offensive heavenly treasure level divine soul weapon was even more precious than a defensive armor of the same level. Chapter 2594, Witchcraft and Wizardry Sect. Jian Wushuang murmured, "I reckon this stone staff probably helped Zhonghun to execute that magnificent soul attack. Although I know about soul attacks, it's not my forte, and this stone staff is only useful for me to a certain extent." A cultivator had limited capacity to cultivate, and that applied to even super geniuses. Jian Wushuang was a prime example. He meticulously studied sword principles and sword techniques and was also working on sharpening spacetime law, transmigration law, and several other extremely powerful secret techniques at the same time. Under those circumstances, he was unable to split his attention into researching soul power. His soul had improved over the years, with the only progress being in increasing his soul power. He did not work on mastering soul attack techniques. It did not mean that he was uninterested in pursuing the area, just that he had too much on his plate. Someone powerful like Zhonghun, who was good at soul attacks, probably spent more than 90% of his life perfecting his techniques and would therefore know all kinds of soul techniques to open up his very own soul world. The downside was that his attack towards one's body would probably be weaker. Jian Wushuang could only focus on attacks of the body. In terms of soul attacks, he might study and perform soul attacks when necessary, but it was impossible to compare with those experts who immersed their time in studying the soul techniques. After letting out a couple of sighs, Jian Wushuang put the stone staff into the interspatial ring before flipped his hand again, revealing two special item types. They were a few golden beads and a token. Jian Wushuang recognized the golden beads at a glance. It was the soul golden bead. The golden beads were filled with a lot of soul power. He could sense the soul power contained within was impure. There was a lot of resentment within, to be precise. It was not surprising, as these were the souls Zhonghun stripped from the official army soldiers. Was he not worried his state of mind would be corrupted after absorbing and refining soul power which had such huge resentment to restore his strength? A trace of anger flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Thereafter, he tightened his grip around the golden beads and directly crushed them along with the soul power contained within. Jian Wushuang finally looked at the token. At first glance, the token looked ordinary and inconspicuous among the treasures found in Zhonghun's interspatial ring. Jian Wushuang only noticed it because of the unique, indescribable aura it exuded. He held the token in his hand and cautiously channeled his soul power into the token. As soon as his soul power sipped into the token, he sensed an astounding power contained therein. The power formed a huge but unclear human face which opened his mouth and swallowed Jian Wushuang's soul power. Jian Wushuang was greatly startled. Witchcraft and Wizardry Sect? His pupils narrowed slightly. Witchcraft and Wizardry Sect was the message he received from the human face after it swallowed his soul power. The token must be related to the Witchcraft and Wizardry Sect. Witchcraft and Wizardry Sect? It must either be a powerful force or a sect. Judging from this token, this sect is anything but ordinary. I wonder if Jianghu was a member of the Witchcraft and Wizardry Sect. Jian Wushuang muttered. He had never heard of the Witchcraft and Wizardry Sect, nor was he interested in it. Judging from Jianghu's skills and techniques, he was very likely a member of the Witchcraft and Wizardry Sect. It doesn't matter where he's from. What matters is that I've killed him and gotten quite a fair bit of benefits from him. That's enough. Jian Wushuang smiled and felt quite happy in his heart. There was only 1 year away from the Star-Picking Pavilion's auction. Jian Wushuang was worried his assets were insufficient to buy the stately painting from the auction. It was fortunate that Jianghu came. He had gained resources and treasures worth about 15 million primordial stones as well as the 3 precious heavenly treasures from Jianghu. Adding the divine destructive beast secret technique he got from San Shouwang, he finally had a substantial amount of wealth to bid at the auction with confidence. After killing Jianghu, Jian Wushuang had no reason to stay in the forest, hence he returned to the military camp. Xiao Tiexin, Song Heng and Mo Shan, and the others greeted him upon his return. "Master, are you okay?" Xiao Tiexin asked. "I'm all right." Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. "Territorial Lord, have you found that demon?" Mo Shan asked. "I found and killed him," replied Jian Wushuang. "Killed?" Mo Shan and the others were startled. All of them had dealt with the demon before and he was known to be powerful with despicable means. In addition, the demon's strength must have improved by leaps and bounds after killing so many soldiers and absorbing their soul power according to Jian Wushuang. Although Jian Wushuang was the territorial lord, he was merely an earth ultimate god. All of them thought it would be good if Jian Wushuang could defeat the demon and rid him from the northern Darkstar territory. Surprisingly, Jian Wushuang had beheaded and killed the demon. Was he really beheaded and killed? Many people, especially those experts from Jianghu Wilderness, were not entirely convinced. Jian Wushuang of course knew what was on their minds, judging from their expression change. He immediately flipped his hand and a dark spear appeared in his hand. Mo Shan, your 2 battalions fought with the demon before, so you should be familiar with the weapon he used. Is this the weapon that the demon used? Jian Wushuang smiled. Mo Shan was startled before he nodded incessantly while staring at the black spear. Yes, it's his spear. The breath of aura is the same as the divine weapon used by that demon. He's really killed? The soldiers as well as those powerful experts from Jianghu Wilderness were overjoyed and were completely convinced. If the territorial lord had that divine weapon, the demon must have been killed by the territorial lord. All hail territorial lord. Territorial lord, thank you for solving this crisis for Jianghu Wilderness. All the sects and cultivators in Jianghu Wilderness are truly grateful. Voices of awe and gratitude sounded one after another. Jian Wushuang did not pay much attention to them. Mo Shan, you should stay and sort out the aftermath. Shiner and Songheng, let's go back. Jian Wushuang waved his sleeve and was already on his way toward the territorial lord mansion. Chapter 2595. Visitors. After returning to the territorial lord mansion, Jian Wushuang handed over the mansion's matters to Xiao Tiexin and Songheng before going into seclusion again. His only purpose for going into seclusion was to refine the primordial stones and make a breakthrough to peak ultimate god. He was able to display the powers of a primary-level Earth Ultimate God when he discharged his divine power. Nonetheless, his real divine power was merely at the high-level Ultimate God under the Black Stone's disguise. He was still a step away from becoming peak Ultimate God. He wanted to cross into the higher cultivation realm before the auction started. That was his desire. However, he was uncertain if it could be done at his will. The divine power contained in the primordial stones was no longer enough for him after all. Although the divine power was vast enough, its purity was far from sufficient. However, he could attempt crossing over to the peak ultimate god realm with such a large number of primordial stones at his disposal. He was really uncertain if he could make a breakthrough, so he could only try his best. A month passed in a blink of an eye. In the void above northern Darkstar territory, 2 figures were heading in the territorial lord mansion side by side. Those 2 people, which consist of a man and a woman, looked very young. We should be arriving at the territorial lord mansion soon. I really want to see what the northern Darkstar territorial lord who killed Jianghu looks like. A handsome white-robed young man smiled. Senior brother, don't you think you're expecting too much of the northern Darkstar territorial lord? He probably just got lucky. How good could he be? A red-clothed girl next to the young man pouted. Junior sister, don't underestimate him, or should I say don't underestimate Jianghu. Jianghu was from the witchcraft and wizardry sect, who are extremely cunning with their despicable means. Both of us paid a huge price to force him into a dead end. I thought he was going to die, but he managed to escape from under our noses with his trump card. Even if he was hurt and suffered from the backlash to the point that he lost his strength, someone like him was easy to be killed. However, he ends up dying in the hands of the territorial lord. I don't believe the territorial lord is just lucky and inept, said the young man. He knew exactly how difficult it was to deal with Jianghu. It was why he became curious about the Northern Darkstar territorial lord who killed Jianghu. We're here. The duo arrived in front of the territorial lord mansion and stopped. Territorial lord. The young man shouted with his loud and clear voice, which reverberated every corner of the mansion, including the underground palace's secret chamber where Jian Wushuang was. Jian Wushuang heard the young man. Jian Wushuang, who had remained in the secret chamber to refine primordial stones while trying to find ways of making a breakthrough to the peak ultimate god realm, immediately opened his eyes and furrowed his brows slightly. The very next second, he took action and appeared in the void above the mansion before the two youngsters. The two of you? Jian Wushuang looked at the two people in front of him and was shaken up. Heaven Ultimate God. These two people are both at the Heaven Ultimate God realm. The two of them did not hide their divine power breath, hence Jian Wushuang noticed their realm at a glance. Those two were genuine Heaven Ultimate God experts, and unlike Jianghu, both were at their peak, especially that handsome young man. The young man just stood there. Although he did not make any move, he was exerting an invisible pressure on Jian Wushuang. The pressure he exuded was much stronger than any Jian Wushuang had ever experienced in his current life. He was a terrifying Heaven Ultimate God. I'm Jenny. A pleasure to meet the two masters. Jian Wushuang was respectful toward the experts and saluted them slightly. Is Jenny your name? The handsome young man looked at Jian Wushuang with a gentle smile on his face. My name is Su Qin, and this is my junior sister, Lu Xiener. We're both here to meet the territorial lord. I wonder why the two of you are looking for me? Jian Wushuang asked. Hang on. Could you invite us into your mansion first? Su Qin asked. Of course. Please, masters. Jian Wushuang led the two of them to his mansion. In a majestic hall, the three of them sat down on a table respectively as Xiao Tiexin and several maids brought food and wine. Xiner, you may leave first, ordered Jian Wushuang. Yes. Xiao Tiexin nodded and peeked at the Su Qin duo before leaving. After they left, Jian Wushuang waved his hand and set up a heavy restrictive shield around the hall. Masters, could you please tell me about the matter now? Jian Wushuang remained humble but unperturbed. Jian Wushuang was capable of fighting against a Heaven Ultimate God and even an undying saint. There was no need for him to be afraid, as opponents at those levels were no longer able to kill him. Territorial Lord, the two of us are here only for one matter. I wonder if you've heard of Jianghu? Su Qin smiled and studied Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang remained a straight face, but his heart skipped a beat. He guessed those two people were probably there for Jianghu and was proven to be right. I do know Jianghu. I killed him. Jian Wushuang was straightforward. He knew very well the two people must have learned the news of him killing Jianghu, and he would not quibble at all. The two masters came to me because of Jianghu. I guess both of you must be the ones who caused him to be in such a miserable state? Jian Wushuang asked. Why are you so sure? Can't we be Jianghu's comrade? You ought to know that Jianghu came from an impressive background. Su Qin smiled. Jianghu was indeed powerful. However, I'm sure he had no companions, at least none in Danyang Holy Domain. Otherwise, he could have sent a message to his companions and asked them for help instead of hiding alone in a deserted area under my northern Darkstar territory. Why would he choose to rely on killing and absorbing the soul powers of some ordinary cultivators to restore his strength? Jian Wushuang said. That's right. Su Qin nodded and immediately smiled. We are indeed the ones who severely injured Jianghu and wanted to directly kill him, but his impressive life-saving technique saved him and allowed him to escape. We have been looking for his traces in the nearby territory all this time, but to no avail. Not too long ago, we received news that Jianghu was killed by the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord. Chapter 2596. Divine Elixir Pill. After Jianghu was hit hard by the two of us, he displayed a life-saving secret technique which drastically reduced his strength. Anyhow, he was a genuine Heaven Ultimate God after all. He had always been good at soul attacks and was not one to be trifled with. You must have something up your sleeves to be able to kill Jianghu. Su Qin smiled. I was just lucky. If he was at his peak or had recovered his strength to about 70 or 80%, I will have to run when I see him, said Jian Wushuang. Perhaps. Su Qin smiled faintly and paused before continuing to say, Territorial Lord, although you killed Zhong Hun, there's something in his interspatial ring that is extremely important to me and my junior sister. What is it? Jian Wushuang's expression remained unchanged but was quite wary. He knew Su Qin must have a purpose for the visit. Jian Wushuang was leaning toward believing they were there for Zhong Hun's treasures. Jian Wushuang was surprised to hear that they were only after one thing. It's a token. A very special token. You can have a look at Zhong Hun's interspatial ring and should be able to find it in the ring, said Su Qin. A special token? Jian Wushuang raised his brows and was immediately reminded of the token related to the witchcraft and wizardry sect. That must be the token that Su Qin wanted, but Jian Wushuang did not immediately take it out. Territorial Lord, you rightfully own everything that Zhong Hun left behind since you're the one who killed him. However, the token is essential to my sister and me. We have to bring it back to our sect to complete our mission. We earnestly hope you can give it to us. We won't take it from you without compensation, of course. We'll give you something in return. After Su Qin finished speaking, he waved his hand, and 3 white elixir pills that exuded an alluring scent appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. What are these? Jian Wushuang looked at those 3 elixir pills with his sharply constricted pupils. Those 3 elixir pills contained a surging divine power that sparked Jian Wushuang's excitement. Their power was very pure, at least countless times purer than the primordial stone's divine power which he used to improve his cultivation realm. These are divine elixir pills. You should know about it. Su Qin smiled. Jian Wushuang was shaken up. He knew about the divine elixir pills, of course. It contained pure divine power and was especially used by cultivators above the undying saint realm to restore their divine power. Under normal circumstances, an ordinary undying saint who had exhausted his divine power needed approximately 10 pills to completely recover his strength. In short, these elixir pills were useful even to an undying saint. The market price of a divine elixir pill was worth 5 million primordial stones. It was the accepted exchange price. However, one was only able to exchange divine elixir pills for primordial stones, as not many would be willing to do it the other way round. I'm only one step away from peak ultimate god realm. I wanted to rely on absorbing and refining primordial stones to make a breakthrough, but I've used up a huge amount of primordial stones and got the very minimal effect after spending a month in seclusion. If I want to make a breakthrough, I must find something with purer divine power than primordial stones. I'm sure the divine power contained in these elixir pills is countless times stronger than those contained in the primordial stones. These divine elixir pills came handy for me. Jian Wushuang was very excited upon looking at the 3 divine elixir pills before him, but he kept a straight expression. Master Su Qin, do you mean that you want to use these 3 divine elixir pills to exchange for that token? Jian Wushuang asked flatly. Yes, these 3 divine elixir pills will be yours as long as you are willing to give me the token. Su Qin smiled. I wonder why it's only worth 3 divine elixir pills if the token is so important for both of you? Jian Wushuang asked. Su Qin glanced at the red-clothed girl, Lu Xianer, next to him before explaining, Truthfully, the token is of no use to my junior sister or me, but it's beneficial to our sect. As for what it's used for, even junior sister and I don't know anything about it, as our mission is only to bring it back to our sect. Is that so? Jian Wushuang raised his brows before asking, May I know which sect both of you come from? Where do I come from? What does it have to do with you? Lu Xianer, who had been quiet, finally let out a cold snort and glared coldly at Jian Wushuang. Junior sister. Su Qin reprimanded and switched to a gentle tone. Sorry, my junior sister is a little impatient. We received an order from our sect elders never to reveal the name of our sect unless we are in a critical life or death moment. We ask for your kind understanding, Territorial Lord. That's all right. Jian Wushuang waved his hand a few times, feeling quite embarrassed. After pondering for a while, Jian Wushuang kept the 3 divine elixir pills in front of him into the interspatial ring before taking out the special token. Masters, is this what you're looking for? Jian Wushuang asked. Su Qin looked at the token and instantly discharged his soul power. After a while, his face sank before cracking a smile. Indeed, this is the token. Thank you, Territorial Lord. I should be the one thanking both of you. Jian Wushuang smiled. My junior sister and I shall leave now since we've gotten the token. Su Qin no longer lingered around. Have a safe trip. Jian Wushuang got up to send them away. After a while, Su Qin and Lu Xianer left the Territorial Lord mansion. Jian Wushuang finally let out a sigh of relief after watching the two of them left and completely disappeared from his sight. These two people are so weird, Jian Wushuang murmured. Was weird indeed. They were two powerful heaven ultimate gods, especially Su Qin. With their intimidating strength, those two people could easily force Jian Wushuang to hand over the token. Even if they chose not to be harsh, they should at least behave like a powerful expert. However, Su Qin was very kind to Jian Wushuang apart from the desolated look shown by Lu Xiener. Su Qin did not even have the air of a prideful person. Not only was he not harsh, but he also offered 3 divine elixir pills in exchange for the token. How easygoing. Su Qin seemed like an easygoing person with no temper at all. Jian Wushuang, who had experiences from his previous and present life, would not be so naive as to believe Su Qin was a kind person. Chapter 2597, Peak Ultimate God. Not only are they extremely polite to me, but they must also have an extraordinary background. Although they are reluctant to reveal their sect, they can produce 3 divine elixir pills at will with no sweat. Their background is indeed unusual, Jian Wushuang exclaimed. The 3 divine elixir pills were worth 15 million primordial stones. Such a large amount of wealth was substantial even to ordinary heaven ultimate gods from an impressive background. However, the two of them were unfazed. It was as though those 3 divine elixir pills were nothing to them. Someone so generous must be from a spectacular background. That token is useless to me anyway, and I'm not interested in figuring out the token's secrets, as I've already made a lot of money in exchange for bagging those 3 divine elixir pills. Jian Wushuang smiled secretly. Those 3 divine elixir pills happened to be of great use to him at that time. Jian Wushuang immediately returned to the underground palace and began his seclusion once again. In the void not far from the territorial lord mansion, Su Qin and Lu Xiener were walking side by side. Senior brother, I don't understand. Why did you need to give him 3 divine elixir pills for the token? Although those 3 divine elixir pills are nothing to us, it's a waste for you to do that. I'm sure the territorial lord would have handed the token to you nonetheless even if you gave him nothing in return, said Lu Xiener. This token is of no use to him and will merely keep it in the interspatial ring. It's better to give it to us as a favor, but, junior sister, I told you before that the Northern Darkstar territorial lord is not someone to be trifled since he's able to kill Zhonghan. Su Qin smiled. Why can't I see that he's extraordinary? I think he just got lucky. We're kind enough to not ask him for all the treasures left behind by Zhonghan and instead asked for the token. Lu Xiener pouted. Su Qin did not reply immediately. He stopped dead in his tracks at the void before raising his palm. There was a poised golden beetle in the center of his palm. Some faint blood streaks pattern could be seen on the golden beetle's elytra. Why did you bring Goldie out? Lu Xiener glanced at the golden beetle confusingly and asked Su Qin. Didn't you say that you can't tell if the Northern Darkstar territorial lord is extraordinary? Goldie could see it. Su Qin smiled before continuing. You know, Goldie can recognize and distinguish various beings in the ancient god domain. There are many special ethnic groups and life forms in the ancient god domain, including human cultivators, each having different life ratings. No matter how the other party tries to stay under the radar, Goldie could easily sense the other party's life rating as long as it's nearby. Lu Xiener said, Oh really? Goldie is just next to the Northern Darkstar territorial lord. Could it sense he has an impressive life rating? Is he not just a human cultivator? No, Goldie was unable to sense it. It was just right next to the Northern Darkstar territorial lord, yet it sensed nothing. This was the reason I've said the Northern Darkstar territorial lord must be unusually powerful, explained Su Qin. Lu Xiener was startled. She knew of Goldie's ability. There were all kinds of special ethics and beings in the world. There were very few among them which Goldie was unable to sense their life rating. The two of them had never seen it happen. Could that Northern Darkstar territorial lord be a special being? Lu Xiener asked instinctively. I don't know, and it's not convenient for us to ask him either. Anyways, we shouldn't look down upon someone like him. It's the reason I took out 3 divine elixir pills to exchange the token with him. I want him to be happy or even grateful to us. There might be a chance for us to grow closer if we have an opportunity to meet again in the future, said Su Qin with a smile. Those 3 divine elixir pills were nothing to them. It was certainly a good bargain to use them in exchange for a good relationship with someone having an impressive life rating. Let's go. We've settled Zhonghan, and next is the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's matter, urged Su Qin. That's not something urgent. I want to go explore around here since we are outside the sect, said Lu Xiener. Su Qin smiled and did not object to the idea as the two continued to walk around and soon disappeared into the void. In the underground palace, a thick divine power erupted from his body as Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged. My divine power has reached the very limits of high-level ultimate God and there's nothing more I can do to improve. I shall accumulate a huge gush of divine power and aim for a breakthrough. These 3 divine elixir pills? Jian Wushuang looked at the 3 divine elixir pills in front of him. Next he grabbed one of the elixir pills and swallowed it. As soon as the divine elixir pill entered his body, it immediately turned into a vast divine power. The most important part was the extremely pure divine power within. Its divine power is 100 or even 1,000 times purer than the primordial stone's divine power. It's an entirely 2 different concepts. Jian Wushuang's eyes were glimmering with excitement. The pure divine power in his body slowly gathered in front of the heavy barrier. As long as he made a mental move, he could try to fire on the heavy barrier. Although the divine power in a single divine elixir pill was able to shake the barrier, I feel it's still lacking in power to completely smash the barrier, muttered Jian Wushuang before he immediately reached out, grabbed another divine elixir pill and directly swallowed it. Another pill went into his body. The same vast and pure divine power emerged as it integrated with the earlier formed divine power. It's almost there. Let's start. Jian Wushuang's hands tensed up. In his body, the vast and pure divine power accumulated in front of the heavy barrier and instantly turned into a huge charging torrent. Boom, 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 boom. Several bombardments took place which shook Jian Wushuang up with each collision. After more than a dozen bombardments, almost half of the pure divine power from both divine elixir pills were consumed and a faint crack finally appeared on the heavy barrier. Jian Wushuang was ecstatic with the crack's appearance. Boom, boom. 2 more extremely strong bombardments occurred. Finally, the heavy barrier was destroyed as his divine power soared. In just a few moments, his divine power and divine body were promoted to a new level. Finally, peak ultimate God. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes. There was a deep twinkle in his eyes and a smile suddenly cracked on his face. Chapter 2598. Auction. Although it was merely a small cultivation realm breakthrough from the high-level ultimate God to peak ultimate God, with Jian Wushuang gaining little improvement in divine power and divine body, his strength had improved tremendously. After 10 years of meditation and enlightenment, my understanding of sword principle has allowed me to achieve merit level in sword world. I have also improved a fair bit in spacetime law and transmigration law. I am now considered quite a capable Earth ultimate God. Now that my divine power has made a breakthrough, I might have become quite a formidable Earth ultimate God. I should be able to counter a weak Heaven ultimate God's attacks in a duel if I ever encountered one by displaying my many secret techniques. Jian Wushuang smiled from being pleased with his progress. He had merely lived for less than 40 years in this current life yet had reached the peak ultimate God realm. Anyone would be terrified if they knew. He was able to achieve such impressive progress because of his astounding divine power absorption and refinement speed. It should not be forgotten that he had also put in a great effort in improving his sword principle and understanding of laws. I've used only 2 of the 3 divine elixir pills. There is still 1 more. Jian Wushuang stretched out his hand and grabbed the last pill but did not swallow it. Even if he swallowed it, he could only slightly increase his divine power, which had little effect on his combat prowess. A single divine elixir pill was worth 5 million primordial stones, which would prove to be quite a handsome sum for the star-picking pavilion's auction. After I made a breakthrough to the peak ultimate God realm, my needs for pure divine power have become greater. Divine powers from primordial stones are no longer useful to me from now on. If I want to improve my cultivation using my Bodhi's terrifying divine power refinement speed, he'll need to find ways of getting a lot of divine elixir pills. I'm afraid I need about 20 divine elixir pills to progress from a peak ultimate God to a primary level Earth ultimate God, murmured Jian Wushuang. 20 divine elixir pills would be equivalent to 100 million primordial stones. It was an astronomical figure even to ordinary Heaven ultimate gods. Perhaps those who were extremely powerful or originated from an impressive background could produce such a huge amount of wealth, but it would not be easy. Jian Wushuang was lucky to have met Su Qin, who was willing to give away 3 divine elixir pills in exchange for the witchcraft and wizardry sect's token. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for him to get hold of even a single divine elixir pill. It's impossible to get that many divine elixir pills now. I shall slowly figure something out, muttered Jian Wushuang before leaving the underground palace. Jian Wushuang summoned Xiao Tiexin and Song Heng the moment he arrived at the hall. The Narcissus territory auction will start in a few months. I have a few items to be auctioned, so I'll need to head there in advance. Both of you will be in charge of Northern Dark Star Territories matters while I'm away, said Jianwu Shuang. Yes. Song Hing nodded. Master, do you want me to go with you? Xiao Tiexin asked. No, I can go alone. Jianwu Shuang smiled. He left on that day itself. The Narcissus territory was quite far away from the Northern Dark Star territory and would take a long time for him to arrive at the destination. The auction might be over when he finally arrived. Nonetheless, there were wormholes around the Northern Dark Star territory. Through the wormholes, Jianwu Shuang soon appeared in the Narcissus territory. Stellar regions differed in size. The Narcissus territory was much larger than the Northern Dark Star territory. A larger territory would produce more experts, resulting in more complicated forces controlling a territory. It was arduous for the Narcissus territorial lord to stabilize the situation within his stellar region. Therefore, the Narcissus territorial lord was much more powerful than the territorial lord from other stellar regions, with news stating the Narcissus territorial lord was a heaven ultimate god. Due to the Narcissus territory being one of the larger stellar regions in Danyang Holy Domain, the star-picking pavilion had chosen to hold the auction event there. In a magnificent and huge stone fort constructed entirely of red quicksand, the quicksand was flowing slowly like a river and breathing life into the stone fort. The star-picking pavilion was located exactly in that stone fort. Although it was only one of star-picking pavilion's sub-pavilions in Danyang Holy Domain, its outlook was still magnificent and breathtaking. In front of the stone fort's gate, 4 tall and burly figures stood there motionless like sculptures, with their eyes occasionally scanning the passers-by or people walking out of the stone fort. Those 4 people were excusing the divine power breath of an ultimate god. The star-picking pavilion was indeed impressive that even their guards were ultimate gods. Draped in a golden robe, Jianwu Shuang with a long sword on his back arrived at the magnificent red stone fort and did not deliberately constrain his divine power breath. He was exuding the divine power breath of a high-level earth ultimate god under the black stone's disguise. Is this the star-picking pavilion? Jianwu Shuang raised his head and glanced at the towering red stone fort in front of him before walking into the fort without any hesitation. The 4 ultimate gods experts who were guarding the stone castle immediately locked their eyes on Jianwu Shuang but did not stop him from entering the stone fort. Jianwu Shuang saw a huge hall as soon as he entered the stone fort. There were a large number of various cultivators in the hall, with many of them being ultimate gods. As soon as Jianwu Shuang entered, his high-level earth ultimate god divine power breath became conspicuous. Instantly, a black chief from star-picking pavilion greeted Jianwu Shuang in person. The black chief was also a genuine primary-level earth ultimate god. Master, a pleasure to have met you. You look unfamiliar. This must be the first time you're here in the star-picking pavilion's sub-pavilion of Narcissus territory. Are you an expert traveling alone or a territorial lord of any stellar region? The black chief casually asked. Jianwu Shuang did not reply and brought out a token instead. The token represented the identity of a territorial lord with the names Northern Dark Star and Jian Yi on it. Oh, you're Jenny, the Northern Dark Star territorial lord. The black chief smiled. Master, please come inside. Under the guidance of the black chief, Jianwu Shuang arrived at a separate room. The room was under the protection of a restrictive shield while the black chief stood humbly in front of Jianwu Shuang. The black chief asked, Master, how can the star-picking pavilion help you? I heard there will be a large-scale auction here soon. I want the star-picking pavilion to help me put a few things up for auction. Is it possible? Jianwu Shuang looked at the black chief and calmly said, Of course, but we do charge a small fee. What treasures are you putting up for auction? Asked the black chief. Chapter 2599, The Price of the Treasures. Jianwu Shuang waved his hand and took out several treasures which he had prepared. The black chief peered at what was being displayed. These are... The black chief first looked at the 4 jade slips. He scanned through them before smiling. Master, this is the first 4 volumes for the Divine Destructive Beast Cultivation method. They are indeed valuable, but I'm afraid the effect won't be satisfactory if you put them up for auction. Why? Jianwu Shuang asked. Firstly, this secret technique is quite unusual. Although it's extremely powerful, the prerequisite for cultivation is very high, hence not many people are interested in it. Secondly, the star-picking pavilion has this cultivation method as well. These first 4 volumes you've got here probably comes from the star-picking pavilion. Whoever got the cultivation method from us would have also received the cultivation insights. The cultivation insights are only made available to the first person who received the cultivation method. Master, the cultivation insights in these 4 volumes of yours were taken away from what I see. This greatly reduces the value of these 4 volumes. Even if there's an expert who's interested in these 4 volumes, they will want to get it directly from the star-picking pavilion to receive the cultivation insights even if it costs more. No one will be interested in buying these 4 volumes from you, said the Black Chief with a smile. Is that so? Jian Wushuang's face sank as he never expected that. He knew the cultivation method was excellent and valuable. San Shouwang had been in the position of the Northern Dark Star Territorial Lord for so many years and had accumulated so much wealth across those years. However, more than 90% of his wealth was used in exchange for these 4 volumes. He had always thought these 4 volumes were of great value, but it was the opposite. Those 4 volumes' truly precious element was the cultivation insights contained therein, but those insights had been taken away by San Shouwang a long time ago. Noticing the changes in Jian Wushuang's expression, the Black Chief smiled and suggested, Master, are you willing to sell these 4 volumes to the star-picking pavilion? We're willing to offer 2 million primordial stones for them. 2 million primordial stones? Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. Yes. The Black Chief smiled faintly. San Shouwang did pay quite a hefty sum to get those 4 volumes of the Divine Destruction Beast, but the value had dropped greatly after the cultivation insights were taken away. They were worth less than 2 million primordial stones. The Black Chief offered 2 million primordial stones for them to make a good impression because he saw the other treasures Jian Wushuang had taken out. The Black Chief looked at the other treasures again. This is a heavenly treasure offensive divine weapon, but unfortunately, its power is just average. The Black Chief glanced at the pair of black boxing gloves. The gloves were San Shaosang's offensive divine weapon which he left behind. The market price of an ordinary heavenly treasure offensive divine weapon is worth about 1 million primordial stones. The star-picking pavilion will probably buy this at 900,000 primordial stones at most. If you sell this elsewhere to someone else who needs it, you might be able to dispose of it at around 1 million to 1,200,000 primordial stones. This spear is not bad. Although it's only a low-level heavenly treasure, its power is much stronger than those gloves with its menacing and cold spirit. The price is estimated to be very close to a high-level heavenly treasure offensive divine weapon. You might be able to sell it for over 2 million primordial stones in the auction. The Black Chief looked at the black spear. Both heavenly treasure and earthly treasure were divided into 3 levels: low level, ordinary level, and high level. San Shouwang's gloves and Zhong Hun's black spear were just low-level heavenly treasure offensive divine weapons, hence their prices were not very high. However, the 2 remaining treasures which once belonged to Zhong Hun were quite extraordinary. One of them was a heavenly treasure defensive armor and the other was the offensive divine soul weapon, spiritual stone staff. The Black Chief's eyes constricted as he studied the 2 treasures. The Black Chief said, even a heavenly ultimate god would be interested in getting a piece of heavenly treasure defensive armor. The armor you have here may be rather ordinary in terms of its power, but its value is still worth 10 times more than an offensive divine weapon of the same level. This armor may be worth 15 million primordial stones in the auction, and if you are lucky to meet someone in need of this, you may be able to get a good 20 million primordial stones. Oh. Jian Wushuang raised his brows but was not surprised. The body armor was worth 10 times more than an offensive divine weapon of the same rank. If Zhong Hun's black spear was worth 2 million primordial stones, there was hope for the defensive armor to be sold for 20 million primordial stones. I see, so that's how much a defensive armor could go for. In that case, the offensive divine soul weapon should be even more precious and rare compared to the defensive armor. Jian Wushuang's eyes had a glimmer of expectation. The Black Chief stared momentarily at the spiritual stone staff. This offensive divine soul weapon is extremely rare and also a piece of heavenly treasure. My goodness. The Black Chief was at best a primary level Earth ultimate god, but he held quite a high position in the star-picking pavilion and had seen countless kinds of treasures. Most of the treasures like the heavenly treasure defensive armor failed to catch his interest. However, an offensive divine soul weapon was different. It was one of the rarest and most precious treasures. It was much rarer and precious than the defensive armor. The value of the spiritual stone staff must be extremely high as it was a heavenly treasure. Master, this stone staff is very precious. I can't estimate its specific value, but I'm sure it's more than 50 million primordial stones. As for how much it's worth, we shall find out in the auction, said the Black Chief with a solemn expression. Master, please allow me to go and discuss with the supervisor if we can put this piece of offensive divine soul weapon as the first item to be auctioned. If the first thing to be auctioned is a heavenly treasure offensive divine soul weapon, it will set a very lively atmosphere at the auction. In addition, the price of the first treasure auction will usually be higher. If you are lucky, you might get 70 to 80 million primordial stones. The first item to be auctioned. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly before he asked in a surprised tone, shouldn't something worth 70 to 80 million primordial stones is sold as a star product in the grand finale? Jian Wushuang knew that each auction would have a grand finale. The treasure in the grand finale round was the most precious and important piece of all the treasures auctioned. Generally, there would be more than one piece of treasure with an average of around 3 to 4 pieces. In Jian Wushuang's opinion, the spiritual stone staff was so valuable that it should qualify as a grand finale treasure. Chapter 2600, Young Palace Master of the Nanwu Palace Master. The scale of the auction this time is much larger than before and the treasures are of very high level. Among them are some very precious and rare treasures. Your heavenly treasure offensive divine soul weapon is indeed precious, but among all the other treasures up for auction, it's probably ranked in the top 10. It's still quite far off from being the grand finale item to be auctioned. Of course, it will qualify if it's a high-level heavenly treasure offensive divine soul weapon, said the Black Chief. Jian Wushuang was dumbfounded. He had underestimated the auction's scale. He thought that his heavenly treasure offensive divine soul weapon was very precious and rare. Surprisingly, it was only ranked in the top 10 among the many treasures up for auction. Let's make it the first treasure to be auctioned if this is the case, agreed Jian Wushuang. Okay. The Black Chief nodded slightly. By the way, I still have some resources here. Can you please have a look at them and see how many primordial stones are they worth so we'll have a rough idea? Jian Wushuang took out another interspatial ring. There were a lot of cultivation resources along with a myriad of treasures in that interspatial ring. They were left behind by San Shouwang and Zhonghun and each was quite valuable. The Black Chief began to carefully scrutinize each of them. He raised his head after a while. Master, a rough estimation of your resources here should be around 12 million primordial stones. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. He did a calculation with Xiao Tiexin before and was told an almost similar figure. During the auction, I should be able to use these resources to pay if I want to buy any of the auctioned items, right? Jian Wushuang asked. Of course you can, said the Black Chief. That's fine. Jian Wushuang cracked a smile on his face. He had used up some of the primordial stones he received from Zhonghun's interspatial ring. However, there were still approximately 6 million primordial stones. After adding in 2 million primordial stones from selling the Divine Destruction Beast Manual and the 10 million to 12 million primordial stones worth of resources, he would have about 20 million primordial stones in total. Apart from that, he still had a divine elixir pill that was equivalent to 5 million primordial stones. The 4 treasure pieces he put up for auction at the star-picking pavilion were worth a lot of primordial stones, especially the heavenly treasure defensive armor and the offensive divine soul weapon. If I add up all the primordial stones I could get after the auction, my total assets will be more than 100 million primordial stones. Jian Wushuang held his hands in confidence. 100 million primordial stones was truly an amazing amount. He wondered if it was enough for him to buy the stately painting. There's one more thing. Jian Wushuang looked at the Black Chief again. You knew him from the northern Darkstar territory and I haven't been the territorial lord for long. The previous territorial lord, San Shouwang, had handed over a unique treasure to the star-picking pavilion over the past few decades. It's an unusual picture scroll and I heard it'll be auctioned in this coming auction. Is this true? Picture scroll? The Black Chief looked surprised before slowly nodded. It's true indeed. When will the picture scroll be auctioned? How much will the price be like? Jian Wushuang asked. The Black Chief wore a strange look. Master, I'm sorry. The star-picking pavilion has a rule. There will be many treasures to be auctioned, but we are unable to release information about these treasures before the auction. As for the picture scroll you mentioned, I was able to affirm that it'll be auctioned because you were able to tell me about the picture's origins. That's all I can say. Jian Wushuang was helpless. Master, this is your token. You'll have a box on the second floor when the auction begins. If something happens during the auction, he'll also use the same token to send you a message. During this time, you may also choose to live in the star-picking pavilion and I can arrange a secret chamber for you if you'd like. The Black Chief handed a token to Jian Wushuang. Yes, please. Jian Wushuang took the token and smiled faintly. He soon arrived at a secret chamber in the star-picking pavilion soon under the Black Chief's guidance. It's less than 4 months before the auction date. You'll just wait here during this time. Jian Wushuang took out the Fengtian scroll before closing his eyes and began to meditate. Time was passing by slowly. As the auction day got closer and closer, more and more experts from the other stellar regions arrived. In a flash, it was the day before the auction began. Star-picking pavilion was brightly lit that night. Jianghu continued to meditate in his secret chamber with his eyes closed when a soft knock suddenly sounded on the door. "What's the matter?" Jianghu kept his eyes closed. "Master, the auction will officially begin tomorrow. Many territorial lords from various stellar regions, experts from various sects, and also some independent experts have now gathered in the star-picking pavilion. We've invited all these experts to a grand banquet tonight so that everyone can get to know each other. Would you be interested in joining?" The Black Chief's voice came from outside the secret chamber. "Banquet? I got it." Jianwu nodded slightly. The Black Chief immediately left. Jianwu had also stood up and walked towards the banquet. It was a huge noisy banquet with hundreds of experts participating in the banquet with more than a dozen of territorial lords among them. Jianwu was also a territorial lord, but his identity was not sufficient to be a star of the banquet. There were many more people attending the banquet with much higher status and power than him. Jianwu briefly glanced around. Among the hundreds of experts, he spotted more than 20 peak Earth Ultimate Gods, with the remaining being either primary level or high-level Earth Ultimate Gods. As for those who had the higher Heaven Ultimate God Cultivation realm, there were only 6 people. Besides that, there were a few people around who were not particularly powerful but had impressive backgrounds. Especially the menacing-looking crimson-haired young man who was sitting in the center of the banquet. The young man was just a peak Earth Ultimate God, but the few Heaven Ultimate Gods who sat around him dared not act arrogant and behaved humbly around him. They seemed to be quite fearful of him. From the conversations of the territorial lords around him, Jianwu learned that the crimson-haired young man came from Nanwu Palace and he was the young palace master of the Nanwu Palace. Nanwu Palace was one of the top 5 powerful sects in the entire Danyang Holy Domain. There was hearsay that Nanwu Palace had the capabilities to even challenge the Crimson Stone Fort. Chapter 2601. The auction begins. Unexpectedly, even the young palace master of the Nanwu Palace is participating in the auction. It seems the treasures to be auctioned this time must be extraordinary, especially the last few grand finale treasures. "I'm getting more and more curious," commented a sloppy old man while holding a cooked beast leg in his hand as he talked while eating with his greasy mouth. Although the sloppy old man was behaving rather ill-mannered, no one around dared to tell him off. The reason was that sloppy old man exuded a powerful high-level Heaven Ultimate God aura. His realm was quite close to peak Heaven Ultimate God. Even the young palace master of Nanwu Palace would not simply trifle with such a powerful person like him. Another Heaven Ultimate God asked, "Young palace master, I wonder what treasures in the auction attract you to come here in person?" The experts around were also curious. Although the auction scale was not small, it was not a top-tier auction when looking at the entire Danyang Holy Domain. Usually, an auction of such scales would be unable to attract the attention of Nanwu Palace. However, it was very surprising that not only did the Nanwu Palace participate but had sent the young palace master to attend. The Nanwu Palace young palace master smiled evilly upon noticing the gazes on him and said, "Everyone, don't get me wrong, as I'm only here because I happen to be nearby. The star-picking pavilion did notify Nanwu Palace about this auction and I was going to send a few Heaven Ultimate Gods here, but I end up coming here myself since I'm in the vicinity. As for what treasures will be auctioned, you ought to know star-picking pavilion's rules. How will I know what's to be auctioned?" Everyone around him nodded after hearing what he said. Indeed, they were aware of the star-picking pavilion's rules, where they would at most notify every great sect if there were precious treasures to be auctioned in the Danyang Holy Realm despite never revealing said treasures. It was to add a little suspense to the auction event. If the treasures were something highly sought after by every great sect in Danyang Holy Domain at any costs, the star-picking pavilion would of course have released some news in advance. Such was their deliberate act to build momentum and allow those great sects to prepare in advance so that the star-picking pavilion can make a fortune out of the auction. For that particular auction, the star-picking pavilion merely notified all the great sects without letting any information slip. It meant the treasures were enough to attract interest from those sects but not enough to make them fight over it. "Young Palace Master, I hear the Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower, and Dongfang Clan are also attending this auction, but they aren't here at the banquet. The strange matter is that no one from the Crimson Stone Fort seems to be here," said a Heaven Ultimate God. The Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower, and Dongfang Clan were some top-tier sects in the Danyang Holy Domain on par with Nanwu Palace. However, Crimson Stone Fort was the one in charge of the Danyang Holy Domain. The star-picking pavilion would have naturally also notified the other forces and sects since they had notified Nanwu Palace. It's normal for them to send experts here today. As for Crimson Stone Fort, they are troubled with internal conflict and won't have time to participate in this auction. The Nanwu Palace young palace master sneered and derided contemptuously without showing any respect for the Crimson Stone Fort. The current Crimson Stone Fort was no longer the same as when the Crimson Stone Saint was still alive. The Nanwu Palace's young palace master was casually chatting with a few heaven ultimate gods quite loudly and had no intentions to conceal their conversation. Although Jian Wushuang was sitting in a corner, he could hear them. Nanwu Palace, Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower and Dongfang Clan. These Danyang Holy Domain's top-tier sects sent their experts? Even though they are here, they have no idea what treasures will be auctioned. Although the stately painting is a mysterious treasure, no one was able to refine nor open it, which has greatly reduced its price. The star-picking pavilion also does not know what the stately painting is, therefore I think the treasure these top-tier sects are after isn't the stately painting but another treasure. No matter what treasures they are fighting for, it has nothing to do with me. I hope that these people will not compete with me as I'm determined to win the stately painting. Otherwise, Jian Wushuang's eyes were glaring coldly. He was not worried if those heaven ultimate gods would compete with him based on fair financial resources competition to win the auction. However, Jian Wushuang was not confident if his financial resources could compete against those top-tier sects if their target was the stately painting. If he was unable to compete fairly, he would have to rely on other means. The banquet lasted for 2 full hours before everyone left. The night became quiet after that. Early in the next morning, the sky was bright with the large star-picking pavilion already quite lively. The auction was set to begin soon. At the auction site, there was a huge display stage under the covers of a powerful restrictive shield. The restrictive shield was set up by Star-Picking Pavilion at a hefty expense such that it would not be shaken the slightest bit even if a heaven ultimate god were to attack it. There were also many Star-Picking Pavilion experts guarding around the restrictive shield to ensure the treasures displayed on the display stage were safe. The area 100 feet away from the display stage was densely packed by large numbers of people, with no less than 100,000 people could be seen at a glance. The crowd of more than 100,000 people was not to be underestimated, as the Star-Picking Pavilion had deliberately raised the bar of attendees invited. Those who were eligible to participate in the auction were either experts above the ultimate god realm or cultivators from a wealthy background who owned at least more than 100,000 primordial stones. As such, only around 100,000 cultivators were allowed entry into the auction site. The auction site consists of 3 floors. The first floor was the common floor where around 10,000 cultivators gathered. The second floor had over 100 rooms protected by a restrictive shield to prevent soul power from peeking into the rooms. Those who were able to get a room on the second floor must be at the Earth Ultimate God Realm, which includes territorial lords of the various stellar regions, experts from some powerful sects, and even some independent experts. Jian Wushuang was staying in one of those rooms and could see the display stage below clearly through the window. However, none would be able to spot him. The last third level was even more impressive, as only heaven ultimate gods or experts from the impressive background were allowed there. Those heaven ultimate gods who appeared at the banquet the night before were only a small portion who attended the auction, with their numbers totaling in the dozens. Chapter 2602. The first piece of treasure. In a room on the second floor of the auction site, Jian Wushuang stood alone while looking down below. This room is pretty good. No matter what treasures I buy from this room, no one would know who I am. I don't need to be afraid of being targeted, murmured Jian Wushuang. In the center of the display stage came a figure in a golden robe. Golden robe? Is this the Star-Picking Pavilion Golden Chief? Jian Wushuang's eyes went narrow. The weakest among the Star-Picking Pavilion Golden Chief was a peak Earth Ultimate God. The stronger ones were Heaven Ultimate Gods. The one who appeared on the display stage was a Heaven Ultimate God. San Shouwang did say that he has an older brother who's the Star-Picking Pavilion Golden Chief before passed away. I wonder if it's true. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. San Shouwang did mention he had an older brother who was the Star-Picking Pavilion Golden Chief before his death. It could be a possibility it was an empty threat toward Jian Wushuang for him to escape death. Regardless, Jian Wushuang felt it would be best to stay on guard nonetheless. Therefore, Jian Wushuang was wary when he saw the Star-Picking Pavilion Golden Chief. Everyone. The Star-Picking Pavilion Golden Chief called out in a thick and magnificent voice. His voice spread out along with his heaven ultimate god divine power which echoed vigorously throughout the auction site. This huge auction site instantly fell into silence with everyone having their eyes on the star-picking pavilion Golden Chief. The Golden Chief cleared his throat before saying, "I would like to welcome all of you for participating in our star-picking pavilion's auction. Although this auction isn't considered a top-tier auction in Danyang Holy Domain, the level of treasures auctioned are still reasonably high and won't disappoint you. Without further ado, let's begin the auction now. Let's start with the first treasure. Please have a look." The Golden Chief announced loudly. An old gray stone staff appeared on the display stage with a wave of his hand. The old gray stone staff was exuding a vast aura of soul power. That was Jianghu Shuang's spiritual stone staff. As soon as the spiritual stone staff appeared, it immediately attracted everyone's attention. Is this a treasure related to soul power? Yes, it's an offensive divine soul weapon which has reached the heavenly treasure level based on its power. Oh my god, the first treasure to be auctioned is a heavenly treasure offensive divine soul weapon. There was an uproar from the crowd as everyone's eyes instantly lit up. The offensive divine soul weapon heavenly treasure was rarely used in real battles because not many people were good at soul attacks. It was something useless for them even if they managed to bid for it anyway, but they were still cheering excitedly. The reason behind those cheers was due to how precious and rare that treasure was. If the first treasure to be auctioned was already so valuable, the other upcoming treasures must be of similar qualities. Everyone was looking forward to the auction's upcoming treasures. The auction of the spiritual stone staff must be carried out at the same time, of course. The Golden Chief Grandiosity said, "Spiritual stone staff, a heavenly treasure offensive divine soul weapon. I don't have to explain further about how precious it is. Let's start with the auction with the starting bid of 10 million primordial stones." The shocking amount of 10 million primordial stones was only the starting bid. However, everyone present was also aware the starting bid of 10 million primordial stones was not expensive at all for an offensive divine soul weapon heavenly treasure. There were people instantly rushing to bid. 15 million primordial stones. 18 million. 23 million. The following incoming bids quickly rose the spiritual stone staff's price to 35 million primordial stones, and it was still going up frantically. The bidders were experts who stayed in the second and third floor rooms. The bids coming from the second floor were not many, with most of them being the heaven ultimate gods who were fighting neck to neck on the third floor. At that moment, there were 5 people gathered in a room on the third floor. Among the 5 were 4 heaven ultimate gods, with the weakest person being a beautiful woman. The beautiful woman's strength was weak and pitiful in comparison to the 4 heaven ultimate gods, since she was only a primary level earth ultimate god. However, it was that weaker beautiful woman who sat leisurely in this room, whereas the 4 heaven ultimate gods stood respectfully behind her. It was obvious that the beautiful woman had a great background. The first treasure to be auctioned is a heavenly treasure offensive divine soul weapon. I can see that Star Picking Pavilion is quite serious in their game. I was initially not very interested in this auction, but now I'm a little keen. The beautiful woman smiled lightly and she eyed the spiritual stone staff again. 100 million. Those were simple words that emerged from the beautiful woman's lips. However, everyone in the room and those who were on the auction site heard her. The noisy auction site was silent once again. Many people were wide-eyed with horror. Even the experts from the second and third floor rooms who were still competing for the spiritual stone staff earlier went silent. 100 million. The bidding price had just risen to 40 million primordial stones, but it quickly became 100 million primordial stones. Who would dare to call after that bidding price? It must be from the Dongfang clan, judging from the room's voice, right? I guess only they have such courage. They sure are filthy rich. The heavenly treasure offensive divine soul weapon is something rare. I finally saw it and I tried to bring it back, but I can't fight against her since someone from the Dongfang clan has raised the bid. After a moment of hesitation, the experts in those rooms gave up the bidding. No way. Firstly, the bid was too high at 100 million primordial stones, which would make it the highest price ever paid for a heavenly treasure offensive divine soul weapon. In most people's opinion, the spiritual stone staff might not even worth 100 million primordial stones. Secondly, the one who bid. There were many experts around, but only a few dared to compete with her. The auction of the spiritual stone staff was soon over, with its final price being 100 million primordial stones. The beautiful woman in the third floor room had won the bid. After concluding the bid, the beautiful woman glanced at an old man in purple in front of her and said, "Elder Shui, you are quite accomplished in soul attacks. Unfortunately, You have been unable to maximize the soul attack's effect due to a lack of suitable offensive divine soul weapons. You'll leave the spiritual stone staff with you and hope that you can use it well. Thank you, Mississippi. The old man dressed in purple was so excited and quickly thanked the woman. The beautiful woman waved her hand like she did not care at all. 100 million primordial stones were nothing to her. Chapter 2603, Transmigration Sword Formation. 100 million. Even for Jianghu Shuang, hearing the final transaction price of the spiritual stone staff made his heart tremble. At that point, primordial stones were not much use for his cultivation, and neither had he ever paid much attention to his financial foundations. However, he truly needed a huge amount of primordial stones to purchase the stately painting at that moment and would have been happy if the spiritual stone staff was sold for 80 million. However, it was sold for 100 million in the end. His confidence was boosted with that 100 million. 1. I wonder who's the person in that room being so generous with her spending? Jianghu Shuang could not help but look at the room where the final offer was made. Unfortunately, his spiritual power could not penetrate due to the restrictive shield. Naturally, he could not tell who that person was, but was probably a woman from that person's voice. The auction continued. Treasures after treasures were presented on the display shelf. Although those treasures were not remotely as valuable as the spiritual stone staff, they were far from cheap. For example, the heavenly treasure offensive divine weapons were very rare in any stellar regions, but they appeared quite often in the auction. Huge amounts of various treasure types were displayed before the crowd, with most of them being more valuable than regular heavenly treasure offensive divine weapons. The many experts taking part in the auction were competing enthusiastically, trying to purchase those treasures. Whenever an extremely valuable treasure appeared, it would cause a small stir in the auction. In the blink of an eye, the auction had already gone on for a full day. Within one day, a few hundred pieces of valuable treasures were being individually sold. Among the 4 treasures which Jianghu Shuang put up at the star-picking pavilion, the boxing gloves and pitch-black spear were sold one after another besides the spiritual stone staff. Among them, the final price for San Shuang's boxing gloves amounted to 1,150,000, while the pitch-black spear was sold for 2,050,000. More or less as predicted by the Black Chief. At that point, Jianghu Shuang only had the heavenly treasure defensive armor yet to be sold. On the display stage, the Golden Chief waved his hand again and a jade slip immediately appeared then. An extremely powerful sword essence shrouded the jade slip. Anyone could tell with a glance that it was not an ordinary item. Jade slip? Is that some secret technique? Everyone's attention in the auction was attracted by it. Jade slips were usually used to record information on secret techniques, secret literature, and various methods. Ladies and gentlemen, the next item is a sword formation. The Golden Chief's loud voice resonated within the auction house. The name of the formation is called Transmigration Sword Formation. It can only be studied by those who are highly skilled in sword principles and proficient in transmigration law. Transmigration Sword Formation? Almost everyone in the room felt doubtful. Even the individual room's experts on the 2nd and 3rd floor felt a little lost. They had not heard of the Transmigration Sword Formation. However, in an individual room on the 3rd floor, the beautiful lattice pupils contracted. Transmigration Sword Formation? Might it be the sword formation created by that man? That man? The 4 heavenly ultimate gods standing behind her looked puzzling at each other. They had no idea who she was referring to. On the display stage, the Golden Chief took in everyone's facial expression and laughed. Perhaps you haven't heard of the Transmigration Sword Formation. If that's the case, let me explain in detail. The Transmigration Sword Formation was the creation of a sword expert who studied transmigration law from many ages ago. His name was Tong Xn, and most called him Tong Xn Saint, but some called him Sword Lord Tong Xn. He was someone who had pushed the sword principles to the extreme 3rd stage. In other words, he was a terrifying sword expert. As soon as he made the introduction, there was a wave of exclamations within the auction. The exclamation was not due to the fact the creator of the Transmigration Sword Formation was an undying saint, but due to the creator's capability to be known as Sword Lord Tong Xian. He managed to push his sword principles to the extreme 3rd stage. Sword principles knowledge was vast and deep, and the level of understanding could roughly fit into 3 different stages. The 1st stage, Sword World. The 2nd stage, Infinity Sword Tree. The 3rd stage, Formation of All Things. Each stage was a lot complicated than the previous and more difficult to achieve as well. Take Purple Blood Saint for example, who Jianghu Shuang knew. He was an undying saint who was highly skilled in sword principles and extremely powerful. However, he had only reached the second stage of the Infinity Sword tree despite being so. Moreover, he was still very far from the third stage. However, Sword Lord Tong Xin, who created the Transmigration Sword formation, had understood the extreme third stage of sword principles, formation of all things. How could one fathom his greatness? It was no wonder people called him a Sword Lord. Compared to the Purple Blood Saint, he was really very far ahead. The Golden Chief continued, Sword Lord Tong Xin's level was only slightly below the peak of Undying Saint. However, he managed to roam the ancient god domain by relying on his sword skills and transmigration sword techniques. He was almost invincible among the Undying Saint beyond the third heaven. His words had caused a huge stir in the auction. Invincible among Undying Saints? Sword Lord Tong Xin, was that amazing? Although it's only beyond the third heaven, it was already very impressive. Sword Lord Tong Xin was a true super expert. An almost invincible existence among Undying Saints. The most powerful sword formation that he relied on is... Those eyes that were looking at the Transmigration Sword formation began to burn with extreme desire. However, many were keeping themselves level-headed, especially those second and third floor experts in individual rooms. A voice from a third floor individual room immediately spoke, I've learned about Sword Lord Tong Xin's reputation in ancient literature. Although it was something that happened a few million years ago, he truly had such capabilities. However, the Star-Picking Pavilion would never put it on this auction if it's truly the Sword Lord Tong Xin's creation, don't you think? Even if you will, it's unlikely to appear in an auction of this level. Instead, it will be featured in a much larger scale auction. Perhaps one that's well attended by Undying Saints so that they can compete for it. The crowd began to agree. One had to have the capabilities of an ultimate god or came from a prominent background to attend that auction. Therefore, none of them were idiots. The most powerful sword formation created by an almost invincible Undying Saint appearing in an auction only attended by ultimate gods? It was not even the star item of the auction. Was that a joke? As expected, the Golden Chief laughed. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.